live. Hey, we are live.
All right, y'all. Welcome to All Politics of Local America's number one political hip hop radio talk show. Y'all know if it's Friday, y'all know it's time for All Politics of Local. But more importantly, y'all know if it's the third Friday, y'all know it's time for time for the Mayor's Forum with our beloved brother, the one and only Mayor Raz J. Baraka, coming fresh off of what I believe is his ninth State of the City address to the city. And who the hell believe it's been 9 years, man? You know what I mean? And you know what's funny, man, is the man still look the same, don't he? He probably put on a couple of pounds, but he still looked the same, you know. But
try to get his workouts in. I said him getting his workouts in.
we're gonna
man training it.
So we're gonna talk to the mayor tonight, and talk a little bit about that, and then wherever the conversation takes us. And then Zaid, what's coming up after that?
Several things. I have my sister and comrade Dequi Sadiki next Friday. We're memorializing a beloved comrade of the Black Panther Party, Thomas Blood McCreary, passed away a little while ago. Blood was one of those bold soldiers out of the New York chapter of the Black Panther Party. And Blood also belonged to a formation once he came out of prison that trained a lot of young people in this work. And Dequi was one of their cubs. And so we're going to memorialize Blood. Blood will be memorialized at the Schomburg Center last Friday. So y'all will miss me next Friday, right? Okay. So I have to be a part of that. We'll also have Brother Charles Boyer on. Charles Boyer will be talking about the fact that for all of this liberal notion of New Jersey being what it is in terms of how some of our folks try to describe it, New Jersey is a very segregated state. And the question of segregation and education and some other places are some places where we need to lift some volume up, and Reverend Charles Boyer of Salvation and Social Justice will lift some of that up, and also of course
and also just with the Charles Reverend Dr. Charles Boyer piece, both Reverend Charles Boyer and the mayor were at a workshop conference with the Justice Department talking about redlining, and I thought that was interesting. I got there after the mayor spoke, but the mayor left an impression. People were talking about what you said long after you left. And it was just a really interesting session talking about the way in which white supremacy transforms in housing, the fights that you're fighting in the 60s, what they are now. And I thought that was just really interesting. And stuff the mayor does on a daily basis, right? When you're dealing with housing policy and dealing with the ways in which you have to try to keep ahead of what people are doing, like with LLCs, et cetera. So I thought that was just a really interesting section. And especially because, the mayor was there. There were a lot of other people who were there. One of my good friends from college, Elise Body, was there. So there were people from the Justice Department. There were people from one of the assistant directors of the Justice Department, the first Black woman to lead the Civil Rights Division, was also there. So it was a really interesting section, and so we're going to get him to talk about that.
Yeah. And of course, finishing up is going to be DJ Rhino, right?
No, DJ Rhino's coming in. DJ Rhino's coming in right before Boyer.
Oh, okay, before Boyer. Okay, so Boyer's going to close us out?
Boyer's going to close us out, yep.
Okay, all right. Well, y'all know it's not our show. Y'all know it belongs to the mayor. We just ride with him on the third, man. It's your show, brother.
Yes, sir. Glad to be on as usual. That was a good, I would say, event that happened at Seton Hall Law School. That's the event that you're talking about, right? With the Justice Department, DOJ, the U.S. Attorney, all of those folks talking about, talking about fair housing law that was passed in 1968. How it's really, have not borne the kind of results that people thought it would, because discrimination in housing is still intractable and prevalent, now. And redlining is still happening today, by the way. The point I made is interesting that, the government is holding private companies responsible for redlining and like making them pay a fine. But the fines are not what we want. We want repair for the work that they, for them inhibiting our development and progress economically, even emotionally. But as they hold those private companies responsible, who's going to hold the FHA and the Homeowners Loan Corporation responsible for creating redlining and beginning it? And most of the problems, I would say 75% of the problems that we experience in our community today have some relationship to the redlining that took place legally in 1933.
That's a big number. That's a
Yeah.
mouthful. 75. That's a mouthful.
And I would even ask
I think folks need to process that.
or even understand that, like when you're saying that the FHA was responsible, and that, like, what does that mean? Like, because a lot of people just don't know that history. Even when Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote the article in the Atlantic on reparations, that got played for the time, but people just didn't understand the connection between actual federal housing policy
Yeah,
and
well, the reality is the Homeowners Loan Corporation put together a color-coded map that basically said that graded communities in terms of investment from green to red. Green obviously was highly favorable, and red was hazardous. And they drew a red line around there, so it discouraged investment in those communities, not just around home ownership. Home ownership is why we have these huge wealth gaps that exist now, why we can't pass wealth down, why we can't borrow money, why you can't do all those other things, why communities, our schools are the way they are because they're funded by property taxes that we don't own or can pay at the level that we need to in order our schools to be the way they are. But they also discouraged investment in supermarkets and hospitals, which is, one of the reasons we don't have access to good health care and primary care physicians or quality food.
now, can you explain that? Can you
Began
explain that the way that they discouraged access to, like, way housing policy and what the FHA did to
Well,
actually
the
discourage no
FHA was
supermarkets and
different.
hospitals?
That's different. The Homeowners Loan, Association began to Home Ownership Loan Corporation is the one that drew the map that said you can't, you shouldn't invest in these communities, financial institutions, private institutions, equity. You shouldn't invest. It's dangerous. It's hazardous to invest in this. And all of the communities that they said don't invest in were predominantly communities of ours, Black communities for the most part.
Wait,
Actually, I think all of them.
so let's just, on this point, most people will say, most people think that the lack of investment is just a conspiracy theory. It's just a coincidence. There's very little in the popular conversation that says this was direct actual federal policy. This was
That's
the
history. That you can read that on Wikipedia.
right. And
So,
and so I know a lot of people just don't know that. So you're
well,
saying that
that's why
this
I'm
organ
telling. Yeah,
so you're,
that's right.
so you're saying the homeowners association, like a federal organization, literally said, do not invest in these communities because they are
Yeah,
dangerous.
yes, that's what happened. And the FHA did not provide mortgage and mortgage insurance to folks who were developing in these communities. So it made it, and what made it more pernicious is that at the same time that they were not doing that in these communities, they were actively giving low interest and no interest loans to white Americans to build in suburban communities while building highways that would allow people to live in the suburb but continue to commute to the cities so they would not be absent of the wealth that's created in these cities so they can extract wealth from the city and still live in the suburb at the same time, get the salaries, all the other kind of things that were going on, produce and stuff back and forth. So that's what happened. And so you have the advent of all these suburban towns and communities because they created them in a process of trying to create a middle class in America, at the end of the Second World War is what they did. We in turn got projects and high-rise public housing while they invested in homes for everybody else. And so there you have the dichotomy. So when we talk about this long wealth gap in New Jersey or America, the start of that is, the start of that obviously is slavery, but the the exacerbation, I should say, of that is through these 1933. And the interesting thing is that this is the time when the policies in America were more geared toward helping working people in the New Deal, which was probably one of the most quintessential public, policy eras in this country, short of the Reconstruction era, that had the most impact. The Reconstruction era gave us the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, gave you the expansion of citizenship, the end of slavery, the right to vote. This gave you Social Security, right? You don't have Social Security, you don't have this. You don't have the 30-year mortgage that people get if you don't have what's happening now. All of these things that we use and take for granted happened during the New Deal. The problem was we didn't have a deal. So there was a whole bunch of people in the population, particularly us, who were not included in that.
There's a great film called Avenue of Dreams on Redlining. It's a short film, right? Only about a half hour, that spotlights several cities and their MLK boulevards, and how those boulevards were redlined areas, right? And the poverty was clearly structurally put together, and folks were allowed to grow on the end of those redlined communities, and how horribly ironic it was that those boulevards would be named after Dr. King, would be reeling in poverty, right? And one of his last battlegrounds in terms of trying to get some kind of economic justice was his epic campaign when he went to Chicago, right, and stayed a while and made that push for the civil rights bill around the question of housing. It's called Avenue of Dreams. If anybody ever sees that film, this is a wonderful film that lays that out. Also lays out the question of resilience and how another generation is trying to figure out how to do some cooperative things around the question of housing, in spite of the communities facing that divestment.
Right. Yeah, and I don't, people don't talk about this era as much as they should as it relates to us, because while that was happening, there was a couple of things happening. You had the Marshall Plan going on, in Europe. You had the Great Society programs and the WPA and all this other stuff happening in America. Everybody was getting something but us, obviously. And, the result of that is what you see today. People think these communities, look, even our people, we live in these conditions. We think that we created them, and that these Black mayors who were finally given the opportunity to govern these cities after these people decimated them and took everything out of it, just aren't smart enough to solve these issues that exist in our communities. But these are long, intractable issues that are deeply attached to the economic and social system that we live under, that really have to be exposed. And like on a municipal level, you could try your best to do as much as you can to mitigate some of this stuff. But resolution has to come from federal and state entities and the private sector, who has benefited tremendously from the oppression and enslavement of millions of Americans. I mean, that's just the reality. So at the end of the day, like if you're not addressing that or saying anything about that, you're really not saying anything at all. So even the stuff that you do locally has to be attached to this idea that, look, there's a problem nationally, there's a problem federally, there's a problem systemically that we have to address. There is no such thing as Superman. So you don't have these like superhuman powers to fix all of this stuff individually. There is a problem systemically that needs to be challenged and changed in order for you to have a real kind of development and justice in this country.
And what you're saying, it seems to be what you're saying that problem is that there were concerted federal policies that are in place that are not being addressed that still have effect today.
Yeah, they still
And,
have impact.
and
Yeah, and because they did it, they need to repair it. That's what I'm saying, right? So it's not enough to punish corporations or banks for redlining in our community and then fining them $13 million. That's like a drop in the
There's
bucket.
nothing for them,
there
exactly.
seemed to be no money. It seemed to be like nothing, right? In terms of what they give in comparison to the billions of dollars in actual economic loss. To say the 13 million in one bank or
Right,
35
right,
million in another, is that something to
right.
applaud?
So I do want to I do appreciate the fact that this Justice Department has decided that redlining is illegal and should be enforced. You know, so them catching people doing that. I mean, if you pull the covers over, you probably catch a whole bunch of people doing that type of stuff. So they're going to fine a few people. But my point was that there needs to be a systemic response from the public and private sector. So while the DOJ is holding Lakeland responsible, for example, who's going to hold the FHA responsible? And that's really what the question is. Like, what are they going to do besides come up with this money and create formulas and say, hey, you got to apply for this, and if you get the right formula, we'll invest in the community. Same thing at the state level. Like, so we got all of this money, tax credits for this thing, and that, and developers come and they apply, and we send money based on a formula. You have to, all these cities have to, compete for grant funding, and if you write your grant the proper way, you'll get some money. And then there's all kind of stipulations attached to it. This is not what we need. We need wholesale investment the same way they invested in Europe during the Marshall Plan in these communities. We already know where unemployment is, where infrastructure issues are the most prevalent. We know the issues around healthcare and access to healthcare, access to quality food, and unemployment and housing. We need to invest money in those areas, and those areas disproportionately look like us because of the policies that were put in place to target us. And to not say that is just like, turning your face against what you know is true. There is no formula. The formula has been laid out for us historically. Just invest in these neighborhoods, in these communities. And when we went to the Hill in DC, I basically said, they should stop giving money to the states and give money directly to the cities the same way they did the ARPA funding, because cities can spend the money and they're directly close to the problem, and they need to find a way to get these cities the support and revenue that they need to take care of the populations of folks that have been affected deliberately by coercive and disruptive policies.
Now, when you're saying to not give money to the states, but give it to the cities directly, can you break that down a little bit more about why giving money to the states or thinking that
Well, it's
states
political.
can do
For
it?
example, the state now has billions of dollars in ARPA money and all kinds of money, infrastructure dollars they have access to. And they have not let it go yet. Now you have all these formulas. It becomes a political football, and they make us fight each other around getting access to some of this stuff. And it's not based on need. Right. And that's the problem.
Right.
So in other words, if the state gets the money, they could just as easily send the money to Milburn as Newark for political reasons or for racial reasons or for all matter of things, that the money would never go to the actual communities that need it. Like, you have a program, but if the states get the money and they spend it the way they want to spend the money, the way they traditionally spent the money, there's no guarantee, or at least there's a high likelihood that money will bypass the very places that justified the money to begin with.
It would be a big deal for Jackson, Mississippi. That's for sure. That's one of the most egregious examples of money going to the states and states deliberately withholding it,
right,
from cities that actually need it and are entitled to it.
Right.
Can both of you break that down?
Stuff that's happening, especially with the states' rights stuff happening. At the end of the day, you know, if ideologically the governor and the mayor disagree on very specific and fundamental issues, it's going to be hard for you to get the resources you need to handle the people in your own community, your constituency. So that right there, you know, what you're doing really is setting these people up for failure because they'll never get the resources that they need. I mean, there's money that comes from the federal government directly to cities, CDBG, Community Development Block Grant money. You have all kind of other HOPWA dollars for homeless folks with AIDS and all kind of money that come directly to cities. So it's not like unprecedented. And the ARPA dollars came, American Rescue Plan money came directly to cities as well. So it's not unprecedented. And cities have dispersed and disposed of this money very quickly because we have deep and long needs. So that stuff needs to happen. I mean, there are things that the state obviously should get resources around that are statewide, things that they have to deal with as well. But as much as you can get money to the cities as possible, that's what should happen. And so it shouldn't sit in people's coffers for years.
A grilled strip steak, medium rare.
Brother, are you ordering
That's
food
fine.
for everybody? But at the end of the day, we gotta make sure that that these cities get the resources that they need. You know, because you just really
That's funny. I was supposed to be on mute. You weren't supposed to hear me.
that you're really pushing against the wind. You know, and then your constituency is trying to hold you accountable for stuff that you don't even have the capacity or resources to execute because the state is holding revenue and passing policy to make it impossible for you to do these things deliberately. And even in New Jersey, though, we have like friendly, like we not Mississippi. Let me just say that. Like that's clear. We not Mississippi. I mean, we have to make that distinction. We're not even Georgia. We're not Florida, but there are policies that are neglected and not acted on statewide in a democratically, predominantly democratic state that we still are not able to get done here in New Jersey. Definitely, still that impedes us from going as far as we need to go. Still.
That it doesn't really matter whether or not you're in the South or the North. I mean, it matters to a degree, right? It matters in that we're not Mississippi.
It does matter. You can't.
That's like a toxic situation. It matters.
We got to have proper analysis. It does matter. You know, that's like saying it didn't matter, like between Donald Trump and Barack Obama. Like, there's a clear difference, and it matters. You obviously want Obama to go further than he did and was able to, or whatever it is. You want him to go further than that, but he's certainly not Donald Trump. So we don't have a governor that's telling people if you get raped, you gotta show proof of your rape in order to go get a health procedure. Like, who's telling people if you teach a certain book in your classroom, you're gonna go to jail. Right, so those two extremes, you know, I mean, we are not there, but we're certainly not where we want to be, and so you have to make a distinction.
Matters
because
right, the politics.
It's important for you to do that. I mean, it's important even in trying to figure out how to struggle, because you have to know the landscape. Like, you just can't pretend that something exists, because when you do that, when you say that, people who know better begin to think that you are just talking or running your mouth, that you're extremists.
Academy, school begins on
right.
Yeah.
So
it's important for us.
So to a great extent. So but in the case of the states' rights thing, and you mentioned that if states' rights are a thing, then that means that the federal government really can't, like, if you believe states' rights should actually triumph, right? Then in the situations where you do have, like in many of those southern states that have a very hostile relationship with the local government, right? Like, and that means that would mean that there would be no way to be able to deal with it. I mean, that means you're literally allowing the state government to bully local governments, like in the case
The
of Dequi.
Constitution says whatever is not laid out in the United States Constitution is left to the states. And the states already have the authority and the power to do things that the Constitution doesn't spell out. What has happened now is that the United States Supreme Court has emboldened state leaders to begin to do all kind of things that were already settled and push back against what federal law had already, in our mind, settled. Voting rights being one of them. The right to, have an abortion being another. Right to choose being another one. Right. All of those things. States already govern their own educational systems, so they could have done this stuff years ago, but because the environment, the atmosphere is such that all this extremism is happening, these people feel free and emboldened to tell people, if you teach a certain subject or book, we're going to arrest you. So that's really where we are. Sort of like a slave who was escaping, that there was a clear distinction between running to northern states and southern states, though there was discrimination in the north and slavery in some places there, and you get kidnapped and your butt brought back to the plantation. There was a distinction between southern slavery and while most of us ran north looking for a promised land that was never promised to us.
Not only was it not promised, it was never given, even after they claimed 40 acres and a mule. But Mayor, I want to talk about a couple of things, man. One is, the defamation lawsuit that happened with Fox this week, with the Dominion voting around that $787.5 million that they won. One of the things I kept hearing all of the lawyers say was that money is accountability, right? And so I'm thinking the whole time, Zaid John, I'm listening to this, and I'm here we are, and and y'all remember Queen Mother Moore. Nobody drummed reparations. She went to her grave drumming that. But white folk they were real clear. Every lawyer I heard was like, well, the money is not that important. It's really about accountability. And in my mind, I'm saying, okay, so is the fact that America doesn't want to talk reparations with Black people because they don't want to accept the responsibility or accountability for 400 years of damage and what they continue to do? And the other thing is that even as we talk about this now, man, and I remember, that statement you made at the men's meeting where, remember, the alarm kept going off? And one of the references you made where you said the system is working exactly the way it's supposed to work.
Right.
And so I'm looking at that and I'm saying, well, if money is accountability, what's the problem? What's the problem if they know that and we know that and we're still having this conversations and all these folks want to do is have study groups like you're saying, when we're talking about redlining, I think we have to push in another direction because I'm like, I think that these folks are clear that money is the accountability, but when we talk reparations, that's one part of it. But what we need to remove some of this systematic racism that is in place that is still preventing Black folk from moving forward.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I don't think people want to be held accountable. That's number one. Because they don't think they are accountable. Like they don't think they're responsible. A lot of these folks don't believe that. But people who are like sound mind understand that there is a relationship between that. To do that, or to empower people around that would be would cause tremendous upheaval and change around here to do that. Even psychologically, to say we ruined your life generation after generation, killed and murdered people, assassinated folks, even prevented you and your families from making a living and well-being, even relegating you to poor medicine and health that caused your death and disinvestment in your community. And so we're going to pay you for that. Psychologically will cause something to happen that these folks aren't ready to reckon with. Just period, to just say that. And I mean, just look at what's happening in California. Those guys said, listen, not only is this right, but this is about how much money we probably owe you if we did this. Just the storm of just talking about it, not saying we're actually going to give it to you, but
Right.
just discussing it has caused so much, controversy in and of itself. So them not even having the courage to deal with that part of it is one thing. But then, like to create a kind of apparatus that actually figures out how to repair or repay people for what they've done is something altogether different. I mean, this is one of the greatest travesties in the world, the enslavement of Africans and the systematic subjugation of generations of people for hundreds of years, where wealth was created on their backs, and then prevent them from benefiting from the very wealth that they created in the first place, is huge. And if they went through it monetarily, the amount of money that they probably owe descendants of Africans who were enslaved here is probably too much that they have the ability to pay. And so that there may be some other things that need to happen as well that just needs to be talked about. And nobody even wants to have the discussion, so.
I think that's probably what it is, right? I think that they probably already set in their minds, we cannot afford to pay that bill, right? And so let's just not even have that conversation.
Not that they can't afford it,
Right.
but privilege,
Right.
white privilege puts them above having to be accountable to pay it. They have to maintain in their mind that specter of privilege,
right,
in order to maintain white supremacy. Now they'll put a liberal spin on it. You say, well, maybe we'll apologize, or maybe we'll do this, or maybe we'll do that. But in the end, they want us to get over it.
Mm-hmm.
They want us to get over it so they can just move on.
One thing I like about
just sharing,
you saying?
California did go further than any state that has in the country. I dropped in the chat their task force report, and it should have been an example for other states to get with, right? We're pushing for a task force bill here in Jersey. The late Ronald Rice even rallied the Black Legislative Caucus in the state legislature to support that. We miss that Ronald Rice. I want to make that point also, right? So now these folks, and the thing that's underneath this, because I want to appreciate a man as an educator too, is that's the real piece that they're afraid. They're afraid of those children, being educated out of their racism, right? Because when they get educated out of their, then we can have conversations about how to repair some real damage.
Sure.
Right? And they'll want to be a part of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And ultimately, anything that we've gotten in this country has been passed on to everybody else. The fight for the Reconstruction Amendments that were put together by people who were enslaved, now having the authority to run and hold office during Reconstruction, created the 13th and 14th and 15th Amendment. By the way, the 14th Amendment is the amendment that everybody stands on around citizenship in this country. whether you are an immigrant or whether somebody violates your due process. The 14th Amendment is what everybody stands on, and that is a Reconstruction Amendment, anti-slavery amendment that came, post-slavery amendment that came because of us in being in power. Even the right to vote, you know, the question about the right to vote and all of those other kind of things being given to people are is also a part of the Reconstruction Amendment. So anything that we fought for, even if, you know, so due process, citizenship, everybody benefits from that. I will fight for you know, African American studies and African studies benefited everybody, you know, in this country. In this country, you know, everybody began to whether you got Latino studies, Chicano studies, women's studies, labor studies, LGBTQ studies, as a result of that struggle and that fight. I mean, everything that we push for, you know, rises all boats, or lifts all boats, as I would say. So even if in our struggle to get reparations, you know, one of the outcomes is education, you know, to these universities or whatever it is. I mean, ultimately, at some point, everybody is going to benefit from these things.
Right.
And
Right.
and that's one of the things Nicole Hannah Jones argued about the way in which the United States became is becoming actually or starting to become democratic is only through civil rights struggle for rights, because it wasn't when it was founded, it wasn't a democracy until 1965.
No, absolutely,
and
absolutely not.
and the things, and even like the later fights are based on the struggles that came from African Americans. So in terms of that struggle, really does exactly what you're saying. The thing that I really like about a lot of your policies is that for you're not waiting for larger forces to work. You're doing stuff now, right?
Oh,
There
we're going to
was
die if you don't do that.
right, and especially in terms of the housing stuff, right?
Yeah.
And in terms of redlining and home ownership, um, there's some things that you've done in terms of people who are in Section 8 can own their own houses, in terms of making it easier for people to own homes. Uh, what are some of those things? Can you talk about that in light of this conversation? Because to some extent, some of the things that you're thinking about, some of the things that you've done, some of the things that the government has implemented, really can be models for the rest of the country in terms of dealing with this. So, in not wait, like so, it must have been interesting when you were at the when you were at the conference, and the Justice Department is talking about what they're doing on redlining, and how the entire, it seems like the landscape has shifted from there to that a danger from LLCs owning so much property within the city, right?
Well, the
And,
problem is the past practice. It's not even the present practice is harmful. The past practice is why we have 75% of the people in the city who rent. That's the point. The point is, even if you made a house available for them, they can't afford it. That the average house is $350,000. That you prevented wealth from going into people's hands for generations, so they don't
Right.
have any. They don't have any, right? You prevented people from getting the training they deserve and all the other kind of things. So they just don't have the wherewithal to be able to afford the product that you're making available to them. And that's the point. That's the same thing King found out. While we made it illegal for people to discriminate, to allow you to eat at certain restaurants, you didn't even have the money to go into those restaurants to eat anyway, right? So that's where we are. I mean, you know, seriously with that. And those things have to be addressed. And policies that we create here in Newark are rafts, right? And these are things that are keeping people afloat. And we might do a couple of thousand people, right? But we don't have the wherewithal to do as many people as we need to, because you need the resources and support to do that, which means that you need the okay and from state and federal government and resources to do this thing at scale. So even when you say these things can be duplicated around the country, and they should be, even with guaranteed income, for example, we can't do that. We're doing it for 430 people in the city of Newark for 2 years. 2 years is going to be up. Our job really is to show people around the country that this can work, and our people aren't going to get high and get drunk off of the money. right?
Right.
They use this money to actually improve their psychological, emotional lives and physical lives in some instances with a small amount of money to justify the point that what Martin Luther King said is correct, that people need a guaranteed income. Same thing when we put people from Section 8 in housing, or we allow people to buy property for $1 and expand it. We might get a couple of thousand people to do that. We get 10,000 people to do that. That's great. But, we got 75% of the people out of 311,000 people who actually rent in the city of Newark. And if you multiply that times Irvington, Orange, and East Orange, and all of the cities that are around here, Camden and Trenton and all these other places, then you need state intervention, federal intervention to do this work. So I always say that because one, we are doing great things. We want to continue to do that, and we're going to push it. I just don't want people to think that is the answer to the whole thing. What we're doing, these are opportunities for us to stay alive until we resolve the real problem that we have. And that's important because you don't want to change the world, and our children are not alive to be in the world that has changed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's why I always say we can't wait for the workers of the world to unite. Because while y'all going through this process to unite the workers of the world, our kids are getting murdered in the street.
That's right.
We get poor education, and we got no access to food, and we ain't got no place to live. So somebody has got to keep people alive long enough for the workers of the world to unite. And when they unite, we want to be a part of that unity. We don't want to be missing from that. So somebody got to keep our folks alive long enough.
And you're absolutely right, man. That's why I think that everything that you're doing in the city looks revolutionary to everybody, because you're not waiting, right? You just saying, look, man, I recognize that people got real needs now, and so therefore we've got to do something now, and I think that is also a part in my mind, of leadership that is present. Right, somebody who's on the ground and recognize that people need to eat today. Right, we understand the long term. We understand there's a long game to this, but there's also a short game.
Right.
And Black people, we've always been told to wait for that wait for the long game.
Right.
But in that process, we end up dying.
Right on. Yep. Yes. And that's the problem.
Right.
While we waiting for the legal system to be reformed, we waiting for criminal justice reform. We getting our heads busted.
We get deformed.
Right.
So something's gotta happen today. And so it's gotta be like,
what did Dr. King say? Why we can't wait?
Yeah, that's right. Why we can't wait. We gotta fight on multiple fronts. And that's important. People have to understand that, though, that there's a fight going on multiple fronts. There's a long fight, there's a short fight, there's an intermediate fight. Yep. And wherever you belong in those fights where you best could serve, you should be in it. Right. But you have to allow room for people to operate in the spaces that they can operate in to effectuate the kind of transformation that we need as a whole. A lot of times we are upset at other people because they're in other spaces and they're not in our space. We don't need everybody in our space. Right. There are other spaces that we need people to be. That's why that's what I mean by organizing on multiple fronts. We need people we needed people in different places doing different things. Or else we'll be doomed.
That's right.
We'll be doomed.
That's right.
It was necessary to have Malcolm X and Martin Luther King.
That's right.
Right.
And Stokely Carmichael.
That's right.
And Marcus Garvey.
That's right. That's right. We needed everybody.
And W.E.B. Du Bois.
Everybody. That's right.
Yeah. We need all of it. To pigeonhole us into one, it's wrong. Not only wrong, it's a bad war strategy. It's just bad. You can't do that. So you
do not take weapons off the table.
You just let these people struggle in the way. And even if you have criticism, that's okay. We criticize. You can have criticism with each other, but you don't want to remove people from the struggle, though. You don't want to do that. We need them to struggle.
Unite, struggle, unite, struggle, unite, struggle, unite, struggle. I see
You can't take
that
people
is
off
in
the
my
table.
head, in all our heads. Director Yuri just chimed in on the chat, as did Hallie Cooper from the People's Organization for Progress. I want to acknowledge they're chiming in on the chat. The Director Yuri, of course, in full disclosure, is my child. I'm very proud of what she's doing about it. I love how they call it Director Yuri. He's come a long way. And it's tough work. It's tough work.
Oh
We're
yeah.
all paying for with with our own flesh.
So man, let's talk a little bit about the state of the city. But I want to give you some room though to talk about something, man, that you know, and I'm saying that between brother to brother and our sisters and everybody's listening, because this is personal, right? Because I, when you was doing the city's Facebook page, you said somebody came up to you and said, "Oh man, you changed." You know what I mean? And you was cut off on your Facebook page, and that's personal to us who know you, because at the end of the day, we recognize that you have to wear the man suit, right? You got to go home and be the daddy suit, the husband suit. But for these people not to understand, you are not 19 years old, running, Neoforce now, right? You're a grown man running the city. And so when people come up to you and say that, right, and those of us who know you have to kind of step back and not really get into that, because not only are you our brother, right, but we all came up in the struggle. And so when people approach you and they don't really understand that level of commitment, and then they don't understand the pedigree, right? So I want you to go ahead and talk about it, and so that way, somebody said, they said, well, let me go on and break it down so it can forever be broke, right? So y'all ain't got to hear it. Let me tell y'all, so because you got cut off, man. You was trying to explain when people say that, because I think that when they say that, I think they're saying something else.
Right. And I mean the people or the person who said that, is like, to me, backward anyway. But at the end of the day, like, it's like people get stuck when you start talking about my father. Like, people embrace him in a period that they feel comfortable with, and they don't. They most people are not comfortable with looking at him as a whole person in his evolution from where he was to where he was when he passed away. And from even cultural nationalism to socialism and all the other kind of things that he elevated towards or began to believe in based on the times and period and so forth and so on. People embrace him in periods of life that they feel comfortable with, and it's difficult for them to understand him as a whole person. I tell my people, my father was a card carrying member of the Democratic Party, but he also worked like the Dickens to undermine a lot of the things that they were trying to do in the first place, right? And so that kind of dichotomous relationship, is based on understanding that we are in this nation, or he would say before, a nation within a nation, trying to push this thing a little further than it will go on its own. But look, the only thing that's stagnant in the world is is not alive, right? The only time when you're not moving, when there's no motion, when there's no development, you're dead, right? So all things that are living are moving. So if you're in the same place that you was to 20 years ago today, then you have had no development. Then there is no development. There's no motion, right? History is in motion, and so if you stuck somewhere, it's because you have not sharpened your ideology,
Right.
and you haven't sharpened your ideology because you haven't tried to practice it. And I think what happened is when and like my father and a whole bunch of other folks, they had an ideology, they practiced it, and in the course of their practice, their theory and ideas began to change because of the practice, and it sharpened the tools that they use to examine the world with. And that's just reality of what's going on. Like, and then you realize that And when you're able to see clearer, you realize that some people you were with that you have to move away from because either they are wrong or dangerous or both, right? Or they're either objective or subjectively, become counterproductive to anything that's moving forward with us. Like I had an argument with one of the people that I'm talking about because when, for example, we were struggling against Cory Booker at the time. We were struggling against him and some of the policies that he was putting in place or not putting in place locally in the city of Newark. And we have a right to do that. And people do that with me and they should, right? But then when he was running for United States Senator, the guy Lonigan, who is an outright racist, who divided the state up based on these people are African, these people are Jamaican, these people are Dominican, so forth and so on, was running against them. They stood with him because they were angry or upset with Senator Booker. And I refused to do that. Right. And so to them, that's like, oh, you changed it. No, I'm becoming clear. Right. This clarity here. Like we have contradictions, but there's some fundamental contradictions that I have with people that I cannot unite with around folks because I have some other contradictions with. Right. And we people don't have that kind of clarity. We don't understand that. When you go places and you call Black people darkies, or you get to a point where you demeaning and degrading Black people who are in these offices and positions, I can't unite with that. I can't unite with that, right? I can't do that.
And you're not even talking about like white people who are doing it. You're talking about people
Black
who
people
are trying to who claim they're trying to organize other
you
people.
Can't do that. You can't do that because not only are you making it difficult for people to like even listen or criticize or talk about the things that those other people are doing, they don't want to deal with you because they think you're crazy too. So at the end of the day, the only thing you're doing is hurting all of it. You're hurting all of it. And maybe that's somebody's purpose, right? Either is objectively you're doing this or like you're conscious and deliberate with it and you subjective, right? So either way, it's a problem. And so I got to move away from that. There's some things that I thought and believed at 19 years old in my mother's basement with Black Neophores, or 21 years old, 21 years old at Warren Street School as a substitute teacher organizing, that I don't subscribe to today. And that's only because of time and condition and organizing, period. You know, the problem with today is easy because of social media and all this other stuff. It's easy for people to call themselves activists and they have not done anything.
Right.
They have not been a part of anything. They have not organized anything. They have not stood
organization. That's right. Great Rosemary Miller used to say that all the time. Wolf Tickets is not organizing.
Right. What organization do you even belong to?
Right.
Like, what organized structure are you in? Because when you're in an organization, then you're accountable to people.
Right.
If you're just out here rogue by yourself, you're not accountable to nobody. Do what the hell you want, say what you want, whatever it is, and you don't have to answer to nobody. So you can say whatever's harmful to anybody, and you're not strategizing with the collective to figure out how to get out of this issue. Because look, it gets so bizarre that there are people hold as activists some of these people have never been at a police brutality rally, have never been at a reparations event, have never been at an empowerment kind of conference or so forth and so forth like that, but have been at things saying we should open up precincts that we closed down in order to create an Office of Violence Prevention, right? And so you have to look at this stuff. And when I see it, then I cannot in good conscience say, oh, this is something I need to be a part of, or I need to support, or this is right. It's not right. And I'm not out in the street calling you out and creating issues about it, because I don't know if that's going to be productive. What I am doing, though, is continuing to do the things that I think is right and organizing with people and supporting people who are pushing for the right things and have the right lines. I'm going to support that in the capacity that I can do that at as the mayor of the city, right? And that's simply what it is. Like my mother said to me, And I think they captured it on that video. She said, listen, your father was an ideologue, an academic, an intellectual, right? And I felt some type of way because I've been thinking I'm an intellectual. So he said, you're academic, intellectual, a writer. He had the luxury of these ideas. But when he went to the supermarket, nobody asked him for a job.
Right.
Which means that in that kind of conversation, it means that you have a greater responsibility to people. You actually have to put in practice the things that these people are debating about. So there are people who will say, oh, we need housing, but don't have the same skill, capacity, or commitment to build the housing that they say we need, to actually fight through the things to get the housing, right? Because that's a longer fight than it is to just show up at the rally and hold a sign. That's a longer, protracted struggle, which is going to cause you to have to unite with other people to create what it is you do want to create, right? And that's just a different thing. It's different, right? It's completely different. And it takes different energy in my mind. Like if I'm speaking to 1,000 people or 10,000 people, that's a different level of energy for me than it is for me to speak to 15 people and figure out how we're going to enact something that I spoke about to thousands of people.
Right.
Right.
It's a different skill set to be able to do that. And and that's really what it is, right? So yeah, I have changed, right? And
Supposed to change. It's supposed to grow and change.
if I didn't change, I'd be dead. And that's the whole point. That's the point I was trying to make before I got cut off. Like everybody is going to change. Hopefully, you live long enough that you do change.
And correct our errors along the way as we do. I just dropped in the chat the trailer to the film that you alluded to. Why Is We Americans? Important film, very important film, where your mother made those observations and insights. Right? We were sending her healing thoughts too, because we also know that she had a little something that she had to go through with her health this past week. While you were raising up the volume for all of them, that was a powerful state of the city.
Thank you. I want to say something. I got to go. I want to say something about my mother, though, because we talk about my father's change. My mother was an actress, a dancer, a cultural worker. She created the African Free School. All these, there's songs that people know and remember to this day. The Kwanzaa songs, all of these things. Just a staunch cultural nationalist. If you ask her to talk about those things today, she will get upset probably. She'll talk about it, but she'll get upset because of her experience putting these things into practice. She encountered everything from male chauvinism to limited kind of struggle, even with Black people. The love of Black people, then going to Africa and finding out and meeting other African revolutionaries who were struggling with people who looked like them, not just colonialists, but neo-colonialists, and changing the mindset of, how they thought about worldwide struggle, right? That it wasn't enough just to have King Gibson as the mayor. There were some other pieces that needed to be layered on that, and some other stuff that we needed to have, and begin to struggle around issues around self-determination and democracy. They changed and pushed. My mother, they always show that video of her younger with her afro talking about, educating the women, you educate a nation, and the subservience to the men. She would hate that video today.
That's right.
If you showed her that, she would hate it and tell you that it was wrong and that they made mistakes and there was errors that they made, and they get upset if she sees us making similar errors. She'll call me and go off for an hour about things that she thinks that are errors that we're making that they made in the past, and that we have no business. We have a responsibility not to make those errors. And because we're making the errors, mean we have not studied or analyzed not just the good things that happen, but the bad things that took place as well. Because we do have a tendency to just look at everything in a kind of superficial, rosy way and not look at the things that we need to criticize in order that we don't repeat as we move forward.
Exercise and struggle. That's right.
And that's important, for her, which is why, some people think, she acts differently. She don't want to come out. She don't want to do these other kind of things. My mother is battle scarred, battle torn, worn. She's been in this fight with her own family and for everybody else's family out here. So when people romanticize struggle, I always remember conversations I had with my mother about how this thing is not romantic, that it's very real, right? And the enemies that you're fighting are very powerful, and these ideas that you're talking about, people don't want them to actually come into fruition, right? And they will do whatever it is they can to undermine that, even by putting some of these people in place amongst us to create disruption here, so you do not realize the things that we're trying to realize in the city. We send 40 kids to college, and there are people at the council meeting for free saying that there's something wrong with that. We give people guaranteed income. They say there's something wrong with that. We give $1, people giving out homes for $1. There are people fighting against that. We try to open up homes for the homeless in new kind of constructs. They come to the public meetings and tell people not to support that. These are activists, not your so-called outright enemies. And so you have to be clear. Clarity is important about what's happening. And as we advance, our enemies advance too. We're getting wiser, and they've gotten wiser as well, because they also have those files and documents and films that we have that we're talking about. So as my mother and I have conversation, I'm sure that they have appropriate conversations on their side.
But man, let me just say this as you got to go. Your mother don't just correct you; she correct all of us, brother.
I know it. And sometimes get mad at me for things you guys did.
I know. I know.
Jack slap on me.
Yeah. So we know we know if we get it, we know you get it worse. Well, man, we thank you, man, for coming through.
You, brother.
Always a pleasure to do the show, man. We appreciate coming through to do the man's forum. We know you got to go. Thank you, my brother.
Yep. All right, y'all.
Thank you. Much appreciated, man. Yeah, we always learn so much every time the mayor's on, and it's really like it's a clinic about what's going on and what happened and what we should be doing. So always appreciate it.
Yep.
All right. So
he's always he was dropping the mic a bunch of times a night.
Yeah, I think that it's funny, man, because I always I let him run, but then I know there's some things I want to get at him with. You know what I mean? And I think that's where, in my mind, I think that's where the mayor really shines, right? Because I think that for people who, and that for us, right, we have to be careful because, we got to remember that, he's a public figure, right? And as a public figure, he's going to be attacked, right? We know that. But for us who know him, right, we have to allow that space and be able to say, okay, you know what? Let's let our brother be the mayor, but we understand the dynamics in which he's working from, right? Which I mean, it's as I think about that, Zaid, because you referred back to when he was a principal, right? And even as we talk about we talk about reparations and all of that, one of the things I heard stupid ass Tim Scott say this week, man, same thing I heard Condoleezza Rice say. He was in an interview, Zaid, and he had the nerve to say the issue he got with teaching Black history in school, particularly the white kids. He said the issue he got with some of the material is that it would make white children feel bad. That's what he said.
That's what white folks are telling him to say. That's why he's there. That's why he's their Negro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe he said that. It's okay for young Black kids to see themselves as Sam Bowles.
Was a Black Republican in Congress.
Say that again.
I was just saying to folks who may not be familiar with who Tim Scott is. He's a Black Republican in Congress.
Yeah, out of South Carolina.
Backwards was all get out.
Yeah, Zaid, I was listening.
He was running for president.
Yeah, he's running for president. Yeah.
He should just run. We let him run somewhere else.
I mean, I got to tell you, man. I heard that, and I'm like, is that a black Republican line? I mean, just to say that the issue that they have
That's
with speaking the facts.
he's running their line. That's the line of division that they're running right now. He's in it with them, hook, line, and sinker. That's what that is. Well, and see, there was a time, and this is one of the times when I actually agree with Conrad a little bit. There was a time when we had black Republicans who were part of our struggle. Right? It was the inside outside strategy, because sometimes Republicans have access to the resources. We got to be able to deal with them and bring our interest to those conversations, right? And a great example that we had right here in New Jersey was, and he's still around. We should have him on the show at some point. Was our former Secretary of State, Reverend Buster Soros, who was solid, groundbreaker in several states on the question of civil rights.
Right.
But he made some strategic moves back before Republicans were ridiculously crazy like they are now, as a part of an inside outside strategy. That was something that we did on a functional basis some years ago. What we got now, this bizarre, reactionary, extremely racist, and fascistic wing of the Republican Party taking over the parties in such a way that Republicans who do not even identify with that are afraid to step away from that because they're afraid of losing their base, their voice, and position. Cheney's daughter, Liz Cheney, right, who was played an important role in that congressional investigation of January 6th. She broke ranks with the reactionary wing of the Republican Party, and it was about some semblance of accountability and whatnot. And they knocked her off. They knocked her out of the Congress with somebody who was backwards and running their line. So that there are degrees. People have their degrees of difference. That's what the rest was talking about. We have to be able to make distinctions. Everybody ain't the same when we have differences. There are degrees of differences. There are degrees of extreme. There are degrees of people being in different places and with their political development, their political lines, and their political agendas. And we have to be able to sort those out. There's a big difference between the Barack Obama and a Donald Trump. We'll be able to sort that stuff out.
Right.
So that just is coming back to that point.
Right. It's interesting, man, because I think that, one of the things is and I'm saying this about Black America. And the reasons why, every day I become more and more aware of how important, the National Black Political Convention coming together with all of these organizations and young people and hearing how fired up they were on our call the other day. I think that there are some people amongst us who really do realize that if Donald Trump is reelected, where this country is headed, right? Because and I know you talk about 2024, but there's some people who are moving in an area to be even more extreme than Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that they believe that is the way to get elected. Right. And I don't know. I mean, and I can't really tell if Ron DeSantis really believe what he says, or is that just, he's playing to a particular base of people.
Whether he believes it or not, we can see what he's doing in Florida.
Yeah.
Right. We can see that.
Right, but in Florida, remember, a lot of those people who moved down there who are retired are some extremely racist folks in the 80s and the 90s, right? And so they want that extreme stuff. I mean, and that's probably one of the reasons Donald Trump went down there, although he said he didn't want to pay taxes, and so that's why he got out of New York. But I mean, let's keep that real, man. So make Florida the model state of what they believe America should look like.
And see,
I mean-
DeSantis is an old man. DeSantis is a young man.
Yeah,
And these mass killings and these mass shootings that these so-called lone wolves are doing and whatnot. These are young people
right.
believing in this stuff, right? And then it has the haunting, memory residuals of how Reconstruction was overthrown. Reconstruction wasn't just a deal and a shift in the political climate. There were military dimensions to displacing, those black men and women who were in Congress and in state houses coming through that period, shaping the 14th and the 15th Amendment, like Ras was just talking about, right? They came under attack,
Right.
when that deal was made to move away from not protecting their citizenship rights with the protection of government forces. That was real stuff, right? And so this is the energy, in this crazy pro-gun culture. And I'm not telling anybody to give their guns away, but but look at all these mass shootings coming at children, and these folks can't even have a honest conversation about something simple as gun control and background checks. It's crazy. And if we, the implications of us allowing that to take full reins of this government has nothing but dangerous implications for all of us. Charges were dropped, real federal charges were dropped on some folks that we know, right? And they didn't. And those charges didn't come from the Republicans. They came from the Democrats controlling the Justice Department. I'm talking about what happened with folks I know in the Hulu movement. The autopsy came out about this young man who was killed in Cop City, shot at by the police 57 times. Right, a peaceful occupation.
Can you tell us about the first one? Sorry, go back to, because I didn't know who you were talking about. What are you talking about in terms of charges?
Yeah,
And what is that case?
The Uhuru movement was raided by the FBI last summer, right, and charged with conspiring with Russian agents to interfere in American elections. That is just not who they are. That is so outrageous. It's not funny, but federal charges for something like that are real. They could wind up
Right.
any time. Okay. And when I mentioned the young man that was killed in Georgia, Manuel Turan, he was known as Tortuguita. This is it is Earth Day too. We need to want to just lift that in and Dequi, I think she's having trouble finding the link. I hope she can get on. This big, beautiful, green area that's being targeted to create this mass sprawling police campus that's $90 million of space that's going to be used to create this police campus that's supposed to train police in putting down the protests that we saw in the epic protest summer of 2020. Like that is what we need, right? And it's and not only did they kill this young man, right? This unarmed young man doing a peaceful occupation, representing the best of what nonviolent direct action looks like on the environmental justice front, right? But over 40 people have been charged with domestic terrorism, right? So the whole thing about being really careful about what's at stake in this historical moment is dangerously real. It's dangerously real. The Dequi is finally here, so we can transition. I'm glad we're here because it's that kind of stuff that I'm raising really helps us with the transition that we talk about, because we can't talk about Black Panther Party without talking about state repression and state terror and COINTELPRO. So, is she there? Are we all right? I can't see.
Yes, she's here.
There we go. All right. Okay. So with we lost a couple minutes. I'm glad we ain't lose you. Well, I mean, this is, I'll tell you, I'm so proud of this one right here. You know, we all are. This coming, not this Friday, but next Friday. Y'all gonna miss me next Friday, right? Next Friday, we memorializing a brave black man that came out of that bold, legendary chapter, the Black Panther Party in New York, Thomas Blood McCreary, the Queen, Kioni Sadiki. You know, we was very close to. Well, we were all very close to Blood, but the Queen actually belonged to a formation that Blood and some of his comrades put together to train the generation behind them that produced the Queen, that produced people like me doing this kind of work. So I'm really glad to have her with us. The Queen and I were together in the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee. She had to be our chairperson for a minute, and we did some great things together on the leadership. And she was chair of our organization, and she's with us representing the mighty Northeast Political Prisoner Coalition, and has been lifting up this whole question of political prisoners as we ought to for so many of our freedom fighters who were still behind the wall. Right? Good to have you. The Queen, what's going on?
Thank you so much. Thank you, brothers, for allowing me to be here. I love this show because every time I think of the name of the show, I think about Brother Abdul Majid, who, may he rest in power, was one of our veteran Panther, BLA, and political prisoners of war. And he used to always say, all politics is local. So I'm really glad that, you know, this show continues in that legacy about all politics being local. So thank you for having us here and inviting me to come and speak and share with you about our brother Thomas Blood, as he was called on the streets, McCreary.
Yeah, and y'all, pardon me for getting a little emotion when she lifted up Abdul G. We were getting ready to launch a campaign to get him out when we lost him. You know, and then, you know, we win and we lose. That was a heartbreaking loss. He was a wonderful warrior, brother, and teacher, and you know, I used to love going up to inside. You know, he would bring us inside to help him lift up some eyes on the inside, and so, you know, that's how seriously we take this. And then, and of course, you know, on these streets, and these blood crip streets, blood what? African blood brotherhood or blood McCreary? What are you talking about? You know, what you banging for? You know? Oh, love lifted up piece of blood on these streets.
And the thing,
yeah, I know. I'm talking.
well, I was gonna also ask, is the blood in the middle, was that based on him being a Vietnam vet? Because a lot of people don't forget that was also a term in Vietnam. I'm not sure. I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
You know, I don't really know where the name came. He was definitely a Vietnam vet. He was also in the streets, right? Because he was into street organizations and hustling and doing what Black folks do before they become politicized. And then he was in the Black Panther Party, and he was a soldier in the Black Liberation Army. But as someone, so blood could have came from that, but it could have came from just how, you know, Black folks, we love to give nicknames, and they kind of stick. But as someone said, they love the way that his name, because he was a blood, like he's like blood. He's like your brother. Yes. So like it could be different meanings and connotations to him having that name, Blood. A lot of people called him Blood, but then there was still some of us who called him Thomas. I never called him Blood, but other people called him Blood, and other people called him Thomas. But you know, it's rich. His life is rich. His contributions to the Black freedom struggle are rich, just like the blood. So I think that it is very fitting that, you know, when that person gave that description, like Blood is the most appropriate name for him because he's like your blood brother.
You know, in Vietnam, John, you know, my brother went to Vietnam as well. And when he came back, that's how they referred to each other. They would say, yo, what's up, Blood? You know, and there was actually a book that was wrote about them brothers, man, who survived
Terry.
Vietnam, and the book was called Blood.
Mm.
Terry.
Yeah,
And Spike Lee's movie, The Five Bloods, right?
Yes,
So
sir.
yeah, maybe that is where it came. That I never asked him how he got that name, but thank you for that, brother, because that that's just a reminder of like history is just not in the past. History is with the living. History is with us each and every day. So thank you for like that reminder of how we build community and camaraderie that brothers in Vietnam War called each other blood.
yeah, yeah,
No?
yeah. My brother is in his late 70s, and he still do that. You know what I mean? When he's having a conversation with you, especially, because they were like, those brothers who were out there, man, in Vietnam, and remember, Muhammad Ali was the cat who was saying, when they tried to draft him to go to Vietnam, remember, he said the Viet Cong ain't never done nothing to me,
Never called me nigga.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And so them brothers, they believed in that. When another brother would get there, they'd be like, yo, that's blood right there. That's my brother right there. What's good, blood? And it wasn't the term that the kids used today in games.
Right.
Right. That meant something.
And I used it to check them. That's how we used to check them, lift their behinds up and wake their behinds up to the foolishness they were into. They wound up killing each other over foolishness. Whereas Blood McCreary, risked his blood, not just on battlefields for the United States military, but for our own military struggles and survivals right here on these streets, against the state. If you're gonna bang, damn it, bang for freedom.
Right.
And years before that, one of the forerunners of the party, one of the forerunners of the Black Liberation Army was the African Blood Brotherhood, right? An underground organization that banged on the Klan. They didn't let the Klan just run buck wild in our community. They shot some of their behinds back and shot some of their behinds down, and they were totally unapologetic about that. We have a military tradition of our own. So if you go
bang for the baby.
That's right.
Right.
Right. Dequi, tell everybody how you do blood, because our generation, we got blood after the fact. We celebrate blood for what he did and who he was. But lift that up, because I want folks to hear how he affected our generation.
Well, as I mentioned, Blood was born here in Brooklyn. Well, not born in Brooklyn. He was born down south, and then his mother came, as Malcolm said, up south.
Right.
And he was on the streets of Brooklyn, born and raised on the streets of Brooklyn in Bed-Stuy. And becoming after Vietnam, becoming immersed in the Black Panther Party, as you said, was like the answer to for young people what was important to get involved with. Those young people made revolution look irresistible, and people wanted to be down with it. And so Blood joined the Black Panther Party. Then that migrated into the Black Liberation Army with the police terror and murder that was going on. And he was a political prisoner for a while. He was underground for a while. But in the 90s, the early like 91 or so, they a number of folks who were veterans of the Black Panther Party opted to create a formation that would do some much needed political education and teaching, kind of like what Herman Ferguson and Yuri Kuchiyama and folks did with the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee, to pass on and preserve the true legacy of Malcolm X. They created, veteran members of the Black Panther Party created the Black Panther Collective. And that was about carrying on the legacy of the Black Panther Party, political education, and of course, visiting political prisoners who were members, particularly the Black and New African political prisoners who had been soldiers in the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army. And so that's what the Black Panther Collective did. Cop Watch. It did feeding programs. Visiting political prisoners was part of it. The Black Panther Collective was my introduction to political prisoners, and the first political prisoner I met was Albert Noah Washington, who is also an ancestor murdered by the death camps of that they call prison, and a member of the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army, and one of Thomas's comrades. And so going to visit Noah, Thomas would take, we'd go. We went to visit. He was my introduction to a lot of. I met Sundiata through Thomas. I met Majid through Thomas. All of these political prisoners, because we went to visit them. And so even after the destruction of the Black Panther Party and all that had happened in those 4 decades since, Thomas was still active. He was still, like I said, speaking the names of political prisoners, going to visit, reminding people to support. And one of the things about Thomas is, like, when he passed, I was like, he took so much history with him, because Thomas knew everything about anywhere and everywhere you went. I don't care where you went with Thomas. He had a story. He had some history. He had people. He knew something about everything. And so, and he wasn't arrogant with it. He was just, every moment was a teachable moment. You walking down the street, that's a teachable moment. You on the highway going someplace, that's a teachable moment. And so that's just the kind of brother he was. Just sharing the history and her story of Black folks and the Black freedom struggle and family. I mean, I heard so many stories about the women in his life, his mother, his aunties.
I was going to ask you that. Go, you got it. Go, roll.
Yeah, I mean, he was a mama's boy. He was a Southern boy, so he had that kinship stuff. Thomas was about community and Black folks, and nothing was more important to him than the Black freedom struggle, and carrying it on and passing it on and working with young people to tell young people about the Black freedom struggle and their role in it, and helping people to believe, like, you have a role in this and you can do some things. And so we wanted to we really wanted to honor him in a befitting kind of a way, because a lot of us could not make it down to North Carolina, right, for his funeral services. And so we had talked about doing this tribute. And so that's what we're going to do next Friday, the 28th, at the Schomburg. It's from 6 to 9. And it's going to be some folks talking about Thomas in the streets, Thomas in the Black Panther Party, Thomas later on in life, Thomas in retirement and relocation to South Carolina, because he went back down to his family's land in, oh my God, what is that? It's called Rock Hill, because he always talked about Rock Hill. That's where his grandmother owned a house. They had land, and so that's where he went. That's where he went back to when he first left New York City. He went back to Rock Hill, and so we want to pay tribute to him and give people an opportunity who don't really know about Thomas McCreary, like how great of an influence and how profound and strong his commitment and his participation and his legacy. So we want to speak his name, because all too often in these times that we're living, it's about the here and now. And it's not about the people that, people can say the names of people who were here a long time ago. They can say the names of Nat Turner and Harriet Tubman and Marcus Garvey. But when you talk about people in the 20th and the 21st century, they may not really know their names. And we have some great people, warriors that made contributions to the Black freedom struggle. And not enough people know their names, and we want people to know.
And it's our responsibility to look up their stories and their legacy.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things, like, a lot of people, like, don't know who he is, what he's done. What are some of the things specifically? Like, because I think that based on what everyone's saying, he's a historical figure that was organized for the Black Panther Party. But what are some of the things that were done? I know that he was part of the Black Liberation Army as well. What is that like? What are some specific stories about him? Like, why did he go to prison? When he came out, why was that important to Black political prisoners? Why is it even important to the notion of us understanding that there are Black people who were actual political prisoners?
Right. Well, I think
And
one of the things. Well, this is the thing about when they leave here this side, they take so much history with them. Thomas never wrote a book, and so I remember when one of his best friends, his comrade, Henry Shasha Brown, died, and Thomas spoke. He said, Shah said, "Tell all my stories," because there's some stories they couldn't tell. Right, but Thomas was underground, so he was a soldier when he got busted, and I think it was St. Louis, Missouri, because that's where he was a political prisoner, and it was doing the people's work. So he was captured and convicted of, I don't remember in particular what the charge was, but like most people in the Black Panther Party, they were convicted of the murder of some police officer, or the expropriation of a armored truck, or some people were targeted. Thomas never talked about, I was innocent of whatever it was that they charged him for. He just understood that he was in prison and he had done time because of his role in the Black freedom struggle. And one of the magical things about Thomas is that all those skills that he learned as a Vietnam vet, a paratrooper in the Vietnam era, he came back and used that military training to aid in the Black Liberation Army. And so I'm not at liberty to say different like exercises and particular things that he did, but he was defending Black folks. And part of the defense was the Black Liberation Army, but also part of that defense was the Black Panther Party, because he talked about getting up at 3:00 in the morning. One story he told was how in the dead of the winter, one winter he remembered it was so cold and they didn't have car fare to take the train, and this was over in Brownsville, and they was walking under, because in Brooklyn the train, in Brownsville the train is like above ground, and he said it was like below something. It was snowing, it was freezing, but they didn't have money, but they had to get to the chapter office in order to have breakfast for the children. So they was walking to the office at like 3:00 in the morning. So it's freezing cold. You ain't got no money for car fare. And what was car fare in the 1960s? 20 cents, 10 cents, 20 cents, but they didn't have car fare. So this was about love. This was about not doing it because you had a 501c3 funding you to do this work, that you can take an Uber or a taxi. Well, there wasn't Uber, a taxi. You just got up and did what you did, not because they were your children personally, but they were our children. They were your children because they were African children of the Black children of the Black nation. And so he got up to feed children that wasn't his own, that he didn't know, to provide to provide a service. He became a paralegal to help in researching cases around the criminal injustice system and the laws that they use to imprison people and harangue them in these cases. So he continued to be a servant of the people, introducing people, educating young people, talking to young people. Anybody that was making a film, making a documentary, any young person that wanted to talk about the Black freedom struggle, Thomas consistently, all the time, made himself available, because he didn't want to. It wasn't about him. It was about sharing the knowledge and helping people take it and do something with it. It wasn't like, oh, I'm so great because I know all this stuff. It was like, no, you need to know this stuff because this is what our people have done, and you should know.
Pass
So
on
I
back
don't know if that answers your question.
Mhm.
It starts to answer. It does definitely start to answer the question, right? Like in terms of some of the stuff that he did. I think one of the things that's always missing in these conversations is context. Like when you're talking about an armed wing of the Black Panther Party, and you're talking about like military resistance. I think that there's a context that gets lost, right? Because people are talking about today, like, what do you mean? Like, yes, there are all sorts of instances of police brutality. There are all sorts of things that happen, but I think that when we talk about police brutality now and then, and I might be wrong, but it seems like we're talking about very different things on scale. As in, there was a concerted effort that was that was far more brutal than what we see now in a concerted, organized effort to beat and kill Black people that didn't, that stuff that would never get investigated, et cetera, right? Like, what was the world that they are responding to when it comes to police brutality? And can you be specific and paint the picture of why, according to McCreary, a Black Liberation Army would be needed, or a Black Panther Party in that context would be needed? Like, what is the context? Because I don't think today's context is the same as the context where he was raised in the late 60s, early 70s. And I think understanding that may be key to understanding why there was a Black Panther Party that reacted in the way that it did, or a BLM that reacted in the way that it did.
BLA. Thank you for that question, Brother Jonathan, because I think that is so very key, is people's knowledge and people's understanding of the times that we live in. What took place, what was happening in the 1950s, 60s, 40s, everything prior to the 1966 formation of the Black Panther Party is Black folks understood what time it was. They knew that capitalism was not serving them. They knew that the state was not serving them. They understood that when the people put up those signs that said they lynched a man today, that this is what was happening, and that we had a right to defend ourselves. And they keep talking about the civil rights movement and it being nonviolence. Well, that's a crock, because it was very violent. And the only time it was not one-sided violence is when Black folks was coming out to protect and defend the Black folks that were coming out for voter registration and freedom marches and all of that. You had people coming out because folks, Rosa Parks grew up with a gun in her house because they understood in the South that they had to be able to defend themselves against the white Black violence and the terror of white races. And so it was an understanding that
So I was going to say that it was where people could just simply be murdered for trying to vote, and nothing would be done about it. And people would be killed for walking down the street. Right. Nothing would be done about it. When the signs were like, "I killed a Black man," or "I lynched a man today," that because they lynched a man today, and they were sending a message. Like, is that context and for both of you to speak to, right? Like, I'm not sure if this was true, but I'm asking right now in terms of kids that would be thrown off of a roof by police officers. Is that something that happened? Are those just anecdotal? Can you speak to me about those?
And that's important, because one of the things that you hear people who were in the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army said that they needed to show that they bleed too, that they have families too, right? Like the people who are in the Black community, the Black nation, they have people who love them and mourn their murder and want some form of justice and consequence. And so it's like nobody is ever gleeful about the death of anyone, but even the way that they paint it today, the victims, the white victims of violence, are always lauded for having families and being this kind of person and that kind of person, and like, so their death is tragic, but a Black death is that's just business as usual. And the magic of when Black folks have self-determination and believe in self-defense. And I'm not advocating that people do whatever they, people have self-defense was the Black Panther Party's feeding hungry children. The self-defense was Black folks not having access to health care, and the Black Panther Party creating health clinics that were free, right? If the self-defense was food programs that distributed grocery bags of food and clothing drives and walking elders to the streets, and going with mothers to the welfare offices to defend them against the bureaucracies of the welfare administration that was trying to deny them some basic care.
2 community survival programs of the Black Panther Party.
So that was self-defense. The armed part is something that was taking place on the slave plantations when people used machetes to kill slave owners, right? And so self-defense has always been a part of the lexicon of the Black freedom struggle, from those slave ships to those auction blocks to those plantations to Jim Crow apartheid to police terror and murder of the unpunished, as Malcolm always said, unpunished police terror and murder. And so what they wanted people to see is that there is a consequence. You can't just kill us and there's not a consequence, because we love our people and we want to see some form of justice. So if we can't get it in the courts, then we're gonna claim justice. And Toni Morrison wrote a book about this, right? The Song of Solomon. If anybody ever read this book, it was the brothers that were in the Song of Solomon were called the 7 days. And so if a Black man got killed by a white supremacist, a white person on a Monday, nobody knew each other's name, except for they were known as Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So if a brother or a sister was murdered or a child was murdered on Monday, then Brother Monday went and took care of that. So that's not a far-fetched notion that there would have to be some form of justice for the unpunished murder of a Black person by a white person.
Now, question. Are you saying that, like, and I don't know. Are you saying that
I need to go get Song of Solomon?
No, I great book, right? And 7 days. But are you saying that book is based, like, that character and that organization was based on, like, BLM?
Oh.
I mean, the Black Liberation Army, BLA?
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that both in real life and in fiction, there was the idea and the belief in Black self-defense.
That's right. That's right. Remember now, listen, Jonathan, right? We had Akinyele Umoja on here, right? Who did a whole book on decades of armed self-defense traditions in Mississippi, right? And then most folks think of the worst of what has been done to us in terms of violence, racial violence in Mississippi, but there was an armed resistance even in those dark, retrograde spaces, and so we've always had that, right? We've always had that, and what we've had to fight for, tragically, is the legitimacy of that, right? Because white folks said it's not legitimate for us to defend ourselves. We find our freedom fighters or those brave and bold enough to be a part of that their willingness to stand up be criminalized, right? And so we're constantly in this back and forth thing, trying to lift up the validity of the legitimacy of our human right to defend ourselves.
Right, according to their own declaration.
Right? That's right.
United Nations, the Geneva Conventions say that people have a right to self-defense, that people have a right to fight the tyranny and terror of an oppressive government. That is something the United States has signed on to. But as Brother Zaid said, they have criminalized that when it comes to Black folks, right? Nat Turner didn't ask for permission to lead a rebellion. Harriet Tubman didn't ask for permission to run away and to then come back and lead countless people to freedom. She didn't ask for permission to lead the Combahee River
Company, the company he was
right.
Oh yeah, that's right.
She didn't ask the power structure if I have a legitimate reason to do these things.
She got a rifle and got down.
That's right. But the way that they have distorted history, made it revisionist history, right? Demonized and criminalized certain aspects and delegitimized it, then we don't understand that self-defense is what Black folks have been doing from the time they kidnapped us, even before we got on those slave ships. There were rebellions before people got to those slave dungeons and got on
all that blood in the Atlantic wasn't all ours. That's right.
That's right. But they don't teach us that, and they don't want people to know that. But thankfully, we have people like Thomas McCreary who talked about Black resistance always with a smile on his face, not in any victimhood, but in a this is our right to do this. And I'm proud that we come from a Black radical tradition of resistance.
That did that. That's right. Well, some of my favorite stories of Dr. King, and I want y'all to get this, right? We all know about the loss of Medgar Evers, right? Folks don't know about his big brother, Charles Evers, right? Who was a Southern gangster, right? Until he went into elected office, right? And who protected civil rights workers, right? Martin Luther King, there's a story about Martin going to Mississippi, and Charles has got his troops rights. Y'all got guns everywhere. Charles said, you just sit there and just do your stuff and let us worry about that. Don't you worry about that. I have never felt so safe. The turning point of the civil rights movement, right, was the March Against Fear in 1966 that James Meredith tried to lead by himself in Mississippi, where he got shot, and SNCC and SCLC came together to continue the march. But the way the march continued, it was protected by the armed men of Deacons of Defense all along the way. And there was no opposition by anybody for that to happen. So that's always been there. It's always been there.
They just don't talk about it.
That up and then affirm that is important. And and what I was alluding to earlier in the conversation before Dequi got on, these crazy white folks that we dealing with now do not think that they're not capable of that, right? They are, and they've demonstrated how capable they are going into a church. What that crazy boy Dylan Wolf going into the church, right? And made a point to let one woman survive to go tell what he did. Right? They're very capable of doing some stuff that may require a new generation. I'm making it plain, a new generation to be able to defend themselves and to defend our community. That's when I had my troops in the new Black Panther Party, I was always banging on our knuckleheads. I said, we didn't have that much weaponry when we had a Black Liberation Army and the Black Panther Party in the street, and some of our kids got now. And we can't protect our community. That is crazy as hell.
Right.
But
like look
a
at
movement that politicizes our kids and gives them some direction will change the character of how we get down in our community and change the character of violence happening and not happening in our community.
And that's the key of what you just said about people becoming politicized, because Thomas was in the streets. Sekou Odinga was in the streets. Deruba Ben Wahad was in the streets. So many of the brothers and sisters, Afeni Shakur was in the streets. So many people who had joined the Black Panther Party out in Chicago, out in California when help me his name Bunchy Carter, right? He was the head of the Slausons, thousands deep. Mm-hmm. He said, we ain't gang members no more. Mm-hmm. We are Panthers. Mm-hmm. Because they went from being in the street to in the cadre organizations that became politicized to be of service to their community, right? That's why California, you see how quick they got some gun control when the Black Panthers went to the Capitol with guns to say we have a right to bear arms.
That's right.
They changed them laws real quick.
Right. And that was actually under Ronald Reagan, right?
That's right.
The birth of modern gun control.
He was at
a lot
the
of people
State
don't
House
realize that
when they did that demonstration.
Right. Most people don't realize that the birth of modern gun control was in California under Ronald Reagan and expedited by Republicans when Black Panthers marched on the State House. I think it was within weeks. They passed some of the most stringent gun control laws the nation had ever seen. And that was Ronald Reagan signed it.
Yep.
A Republican legislature passed it.
And now they don't want to do that, right? Because it's changed around.
That's right. I'm gonna tell you, if we started marching with guns right now, it would be you'd hear more about gun control.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so the key is to educate young people so that they become assets to their community and of service rather than harm. Right. But the way that things exist now, we no longer have communities. We have blocks that people live on where they don't know the neighbors. Everybody's not looking out for everybody's children. You're not knocking on your neighbor's door for sugar and eggs or going to the store for Miss Sarah. We no longer live in communities like communities that most of us grew up in. And so we don't necessarily, we have pockets of it in different places because people are working to create that, but through the ethnic cleansing that they call gentrification or whatever they call it, urban renewal, right? All of those things are sending us all over the place. So we're fractured, not just physically, but we're fractured in our spirit, in our psyche, and in our intellect, because we don't know the greatness that Black folks come from. We don't know the stories of our resistance. We don't know the stories of our inventions. We don't know the stories of our strength and how we keep making a way out of no way. You hear constantly people say Black people don't stick together, like Wilmington, North Carolina never happened, like Tulsa, Oklahoma never happened, like Rosewood, Florida, Elaine, Arkansas. There have been countless self-sustaining Black communities where the dollar stayed in that community and white folks destroyed it. So when you hear people say we can't, we don't, it's because they don't have a Thomas McCreary or people like that, or they're not students of history and her story, Black history and her story, because we're listening to what other people tell us about ourselves, and then we begin to believe those things. So this tribute that we're doing for Thomas is about celebrating this brother who gave his life, his dreams, his vision, his hope for the Black freedom struggle. And so we speak his name, Thomas Blood McCreary, and we say it with love and pride and honor that he lived and that he participated and that he walked among us. Not because he was perfect.
Now, the thing that, the question, right? Like, as he transitioned from the Black Liberation Army and the life after that, can you describe like what that time was like, both toward the end of that and after it? Like, what was the life like after it in terms of his activism?
Well, Thomas went back to school. Like, it was hard because after you come from prison, I don't care what you go to prison for, you're a Black person. Well, Black, like Malcolm said, you Black in America, you was born in prison, right? But if anybody goes inside the wall, they have a harder time, right? Thomas wanted to be, he became a paralegal because he couldn't become a lawyer because he had a felony conviction, right? But he went to school.
How many years was he in before he was released?
I think he did like 8 or 9 years, something like that, in Missouri.
Which is also like, given the time of other political prisoners and that there was, there are still people fighting to get out. That's like, seems very like fortunate. So he was able to, after those 8 years, he was able to do what and just continue from there. I just wanted to give context. This was around he got out around the early 1980s.
Yeah, probably. I don't remember the exact year, but when he came out, that he went to college, right? He became a counselor, right? He was later on in life, he was counseling at the VA because he's a veteran. So he was counseling. He still was a servant of the people, whether through educating young people, working with young people, as I said, in the Black Panther Collective, working as a paralegal for the Lawyers Guild, the ACLU, whether he was working at a men's residential facility for men dealing with substance misuse and abuse, counseling them, counseling young males who had come home from Iraq and Afghanistan. And I got to tell you, that was at the VA. Thomas said he felt so badly for them because he said he felt like they were more traumatized and dealing with more PTSD than folks who came from Vietnam. And Thomas smelled blood all the time. We'd be walking down the street and the smell of blood, like you can't even explain what people like what was said about the brother, speaking about his brother being in Vietnam, and everybody was blood and everybody was your blood brother and that, right? So what people experience. So Thomas smelled blood a lot. Like we could be anywhere and all of a sudden a memory would something would trigger something, and he smelled blood. So he was traumatized by that. He suffered from, he had PTSD. He was sprayed with the Agent Orange, but still he went to the Veterans Administration, the hospital, seeking assistance. And when he got better, he went back to counsel other young brothers, and he said they were kids, and that he felt that they had more PTSD than he did, and they did, from Vietnam. So he did that. He worked for that, like I said, the residential program facility for men struggling with drug misuse and abuse, right? Because when you're trying to cover up the harm, the hurt and the trauma, you're self-medicating. So that's what people do. And so Thomas, a Black man in America, suffered legions of PTSD from being a child of the South, and then coming up South, as Malcolm said, and seeing the violence that happened here, because it was the same oppression, just manifested in different ways. So it's a lifetime of trauma and PTSD. But he never thought just about himself. He was always about being of service to the people in one way or the other. So whether it was the Veterans Administration, the Veterans Hospital, counseling those brothers, whether it was the Project Renewal that he worked for with the brothers that lived there, trying to get their lives and get to get clean off of drugs, whether it was doing work on the Attica case, like with that long, decades-long lawsuit that was filed against the Attica prison for the murder of all those brothers and the harm that was done to all those brothers up at Attica, to the Black Panther Collective, and to being a service to young people in all the ways that he could. He lived a life. He lived a life. And he's somebody who, we should celebrate and honor. And that's why we are.
Sum up where we're going to be, what time it's going to be, and how we're going to get down.
Okay, so it's on Friday, the 28th of April at the Schomburg, which is in Harlem, because Thomas loved that place. So it's going to be from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. So there'll be some speakers, there'll be some cultural performances. There's a beautiful video montage of folks paying tribute to this man who lived amongst us for let's see, Thomas was born on January 3rd, 1945, and he died in May of 2022. And Sundiata told me yesterday, I didn't realize it, but Sundiata said that Thomas died the same day he came home.
Whoa, didn't realize that either.
Sundiata Acoli is one of our former political prisoners. He was on a turnpike with Assata Shakur on that day. He was a co-defendant. He came home after 50 years on May 25th, 2022. And like I said yesterday, he told me that Thomas died the day he came home. I didn't realize that, because Thomas wasn't here in New York. He was
in Cali. He was in North Carolina. Yeah, that's right. Wow. The 25th is That's
Yeah.
somebody I haven't seen in a while too in the background. That's great.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Oh, she's-
you're in turn 17 now.
oh my goodness.
So, but yeah, so it's a couple of his comrades from the Black Panther Party that are and myself that are organizing this tribute, along with the new Heritage Theater group that's helping to sponsor this. So it's going to be a beautiful event that gives us some space and time to honor someone who dedicated their life to Black freedom.
Indeed.
It's interesting because I think when there's at some point he based on what you've said, there could possibly movies be made about some of the things that he went through, right? Like whether it be that period where there was, I believe he also knew Asada Shakur, Fanny Shakur. He knew them throughout these different struggles. He knew
They were
Sundiata,
all
like
in the chapter together. Yeah.
right, and so and also the points where there were frivolous cases that were brought against them. It's interesting because whenever I have these conversations with some friends and they're talking about like and I am not a Trump supporter in any way, shape, or form, even imaginable, not even a little bit, right? But when some people are like they're questioning the prosecution of Trump and why would they prosecute him if there wasn't a case, and I'm like, I am not a defender. I am not a person who is in any way saying Trump good in any way, never would. But it's not unfeasible that if he weren't running, there wouldn't be a lot of these cases. Uh, Not that because there's always discretion and part of prosecutions the reason why I look at part of prosecutions are political is because of what happened to Black Panthers. And they can bring cases when they want to make a point. They can choose not to bring cases when they don't want to. So I mean, I think that way of thinking is can be informative in the way we think about like criminal justice system, what it does, what it doesn't do, what are its limitations.
Well, I appreciate your sentiment, brother, but I don't think that nothing about Donald Trump and the Black Panther Party and Thomas McCreary can be in the same sentence, in the same lexicon of thinking, perspective,
Fair
or
enough.
anything.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Trump is a criminal.
Criminal or racist
The Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army were servants of Black people, like Nat Turner, like Harriet.
Or only thing is that he did to what he tried to do to Black Lives Matter, what the people and government did when during that time, what the government did to the Black Panthers, and they tried to they saw the good and just tried to make it so they knew what the work that they were doing were good, and that they were not leaning, they were taking ownership and doing their own, taking care of their own people, and then they just made it seem criminal, wrong, and everything else. So I
Black
was
identity extremists, they called them, right? Like under the Trump administration and the
right,
Trump Justice Department, and went after people from Black Lives Matter in terms of
exactly.
surveillance.
Yeah,
Right.
just like J. Edgar Hoover with the FBI. He said that the breakfast program, the Black Panther Party feeding thousands of hungry children around this country made them the greatest, quote, the greatest threat to the internal security of the United States. That made them an enemy because that was showing the people that we can feed our children. And why can't this government do something? Because before 1966, there was no free breakfast in the schools. The Black Panther Party did that. And because they were feeding children, J. Edgar Hoover said they was the greatest threat to the internal security of the United States, and they had to be neutralized.
And they acted on it, right? They use their power to act.
Lyndon Johnson to actually make something happen, and even he dragged his feet. That started in terms of state money being put behind that in California behind the late Willie Brown appreciating what we did, and Johnson still dragging his feet.
And how they take it over and they do the most horrible job, and then you get a beautiful woman who gets in the White House and tries to turn uh the program around so that it's healthy, and she is demonized for wanting to give kids healthy food. God forbid.
Anybody that stands up for black people, like Malcolm
Yeah,
said, I love my people so much they say I hate white people. No, we don't hate. We love our people.
That's right. We ain't gonna apologize for that.
That's right. Unapologetically black.
That's right.
And the thing is that they're so guilty that they think. I hear the elders in my family said their biggest concern is that we may turn around and do to them what they did to us, but we not worried about them.
That's right.
We just like
just want them to
leave
leave us
leave
alone.
That's right. But you're right, Sister Donna. You spot on, sister, because that is, they know the evil that they've done. It's like Elijah said, the devilment that has been done to black folks for hundreds of years. They are afraid that if we turn around and do that to them, they're gonna pay for it.
And I don't think she's talking about the New Jersey Devils.
one or two of them.
So,
Daddy, you want to answer the magic question?
Now, I want to thank y'all for allowing me to come on here and share about this participant in the Black freedom struggle, Thomas Blood McCreary, and that his is a life well lived and well shared, and that we hope that even if you don't know him in the flesh, that you come out and get to know him and hear what people have to say about him next Friday from 6 to 9 at the Schomburg.
And you can't leave out of here, because when you sit down and do work, and I love to hear stories about, we talk about growing up in black households, and we say, on Saturday mornings when mom put that music on, we knew it was time to get busy and do that Saturday cleanup. So when you get ready to do the work that you have to do, in the community, wherever it may be, what hip hop group or individual are you listening to that inspires you?
I like conscious hip hop. So I listen to like Dead Prez, I listen to Immortal Technique, I listen to Queen Nejma Nefertiri, Rebel Diaz. I like Erykah Badu. I just went to go see this show of this sister friend, Maya Assassina. She's an incredible voice. She hardly ever performs in the States because she's always traveling around the world. And she did a hip hop piece on her set where she had brother Intercana on with her, this other brother, DJ Tex, I think. Then there was this brother that was a human, Chesney Boyd. He did the beatbox.
The beatbox. Okay.
Oh my God. It was incredible.
You lifted up some names that ain't out here like that. That's good.
Yeah, and I tell you, what you say, listen, I had there's on Netflix or Hulu, Kendrick Lamar concert while he was in Paris. That brother right there, Kendrick is, whew. It's like to see him. It's like he's every piece of him is bringing that art to the stage. Kendrick is.
Yeah, and that's why these record labels, capitalism took it over. So now it's hip hop instead of hip hop art for living.
Well, this is 50-year anniversary. So in year one, it was like it's a fad. It won't be here. And 50 years later, Captain Crunch is selling his birthday with 50 cents in the background saying, "Go shorty, it's your birthday." That's like 50 ain't missing no checks.
No, and see, that's the problem, that they've taken over that art form and sold it back to us in poison. So it's full of, not that hip hop started misogyny, because it didn't, right? But the debasing that goes on, the glorification of capitalism, the marketing of products, whether it's alcohol, whether it's, quote, those red bottom shoes that most Black people can't even afford, right? Unless you a millionaire or like you making six figures maybe, right? But they've taken our art form, as they do with everything, and they bastardized it and sold it back to us as poison. So it doesn't have the essence that it had when they said it was a fad. They said it was a fad because it was speaking to us. It wasn't speaking to this global market or this national market. Now they're in control, and the people who were, if the people who were trying to make hip hop songs today, if those people that started hip hop was trying to make a song today, they wouldn't get a contract.
Right. But here's the beauty of it. You don't need a contract. You need a good Apple phone. And I mean it's amazing
What they
how
can
you
do.
can, put things together and you don't have to fly out to LA to go to Capitol Records and stand behind somebody and let them take everything you got. But I tell you, what these young people are doing with a simple phone and some outdoor space is we had a young artist from Orange, lost for words, but I'm gonna say it before the end of the name, before the end of the show. But we had him on, and he came right back to Orange, and all of his songs. As I go on YouTube and look at his songs, he did all areas in Orange where he grew up. He grew up around Walter G. Alexander Projects, and he did everything in that East Ward. And at one point, the police, were kind of like, "Nah, y'all can't do this." And I'm like, "Look, he could be anywhere recording. He came right back where he is from. Y'all have to learn to appreciate that and learn how to make it work with the community." But I'm very proud of him, and
Yeah, well,
love
yeah.
to go back.
Yeah, they don't want it to work. They want the madness. They want the poison. That's why some of the names that of music that people listen to conscious music, they don't know about those names because they don't get promoted through the capitalist commercial media. So they be
All
more
that confusion about the creation of
doesn't
markets.
mean they
That's
don't
right.
have a following. They do,
Right.
but they are not
Right.
like they're not millionaires. They're not like having millions and millions of whatever that is followers. Well, I don't know. I don't follow all that stuff like that. But I just know that this system is not meant for people who are truth tellers. That don't mean that they don't spit their truth and speak their truth and rap their truth. But they're gonna have a particular audience. They're not gonna have the masses of people like these entertainers that sell our people poison every day.
That's right.
All right. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much for the segment. We are also glad to have you on. And what there's an event that's going on. Can you tell us about the event, where it is, and the timing one
Yeah.
last time?
So we are playing. It's a celebration of life memorial tribute for Thomas Blood McCreary, and it is on Friday, April 28th, from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. And it is at the historic Schomburg Center for Research on Black Culture in Harlem, which is on 135th Street in Harlem. And so we hope people come out. It's a community event. It's about love. It's about Black love. It's about revolutionary love. It's about service. It's about history and her story. So we hope that and pray that people will come out and learn a little bit more about this brother and those who are still amongst the living, because we still have freedom fighters who were in the Black Panther Party and Black Liberation Army and former political prisoners who are very much alive. So we don't just wait to celebrate people when they're gone. We celebrate and acknowledge them when they're living. So that's next Friday from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Schomburg Library in Harlem. So I want to thank you. Thank you all for inviting me. I want to
Before
thank
you
your
leave,
listeners.
And before you leave, I just want to tell you, the young man's name is Dougie F. So if you ever do, and the one, you know, he grew up in Wilson Place, and one of his tracks is called Wilson Place. So Dougie F.
Oh, nice. See that?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, sister. And so
You're
that event
welcome.
will also be live streamed. We have an Eventbrite. Thank you, Brother Zaid, for putting it in here. I'm going to figure out how to put the live stream on the Eventbrite because there are a lot of people who can't come, but they want to participate. So we were able to get it to be live streamed.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank
Definitely
you.
appreciate
Thank you.
having you on, and we'll have to have you back as well.
Cool. Thank y'all. Y'all have a great night and a good week. Appreciate you much. Thank you, Brother Zaid.
You got it.
Talk to you soon. All
Good
power to
Friday.
the people. Free
All
the
power.
land.
Right.
Amen. That's right.
Yes, another section of All Politics Are Local, America's number one political hip hop radio talk show. So we're gonna have a really great guest on in a moment, Reverend Dr. Charles Boyer, who's going to be on and talking about redlining. I had and he's perfect timing, right?
Is this today is the end of Ramadan? So how do you say it? How do you
Eid Mubarak.
Eid, right.
It,
So yes,
It means feast in Arabic. It's Eid
all right, a
Mubarak.
lot of people.
right. So thank you, Reverend Dr. Charles Boyer is here with us right now, and thank you for coming on the show. We appreciate you. There was a really cool symposium that I was at on Wednesday, where you spoke at. Ryan Haygood was there. The mayor was there. The head of the Civil Rights Division for the United States Justice Department, Kristen Clark, was there. And it was really interesting when they talked about redlining and what the Justice Department is doing about it, and what questions you were bringing up about it, like what you said in your section with Ryan Haygood for the Institute for Social Justice was really, really good. So
And before we
first,
get started, you know, we have commercial breaks. Didn't I see you, Reverend Boyer, on a commercial recently? I see, yeah, you somewhere on a commercial. I was like, is that Reverend Boyer? Yeah, I have to remember it, and I'll text it to you. So you
was
out in
He's
these, you
shaking his
doing a
head
lot
like
of
you
work, brother.
yeah, Reverend, you were shaking your head like.
He's
Yeah, if
out.
I was on a commercial, I ain't get paid for it, so somebody must owe me. I don't know
And that's
nothing
usually
about
what happens, sir. Somebody
Yeah.
owes you a check.
Okay. Well, so Reverend Boyer, you've been working on these issues for many years, and have been working on it in Trenton and throughout New Jersey. You were very well respected for the work that you did. I was also happy that we had and that you knew one of my good friends, Elise Spotty, who when she was in New Jersey, and it very much influenced you as she
She's still at
influenced me.
Rutgers?
No, she's at the Justice Department now.
Oh,
She's in
okay.
the Civil Rights Division. She's working in the Civil Rights Division, right? And I didn't know that until I got there, right? And so it was a really great day there were a lot of really good people who were doing really positive things for the Black community that were there, who really, really believe in the things that they're doing. And it's interesting how everyone knew each other in a little bit of a different way that was there. So thank you for being here. And thank you for coming on to talk about some of the things that happened with that program. So can you tell us why you spoke at the symposium on redlining that the Justice Department was sponsoring?
Well, John, can we ask another question first?
Sure.
We should be asking, how did the Justice Department sum up their commitment to stop redlining? So folks are clear on what was at stake and what's on the table.
Well, we can get into that in terms of the program, like what it is, and then we can go into the specifics of the Justice Department and what they said. But like in bringing us into this, Reverend, why were you there? Like, what's going on? Why did you get there to begin with?
Well, first, thank Jonathan. It's always good to be with you. Of course, my good brother Muhammad and Donna, the Honorable. You know, so it's good to be with you all as always. You know, I think one of the reasons I was asked to come was particularly to give a perspective unique to Trenton. You know, there was obviously we were in Newark and there was a major Newark focus, but I think also given a perspective around how the negative effects of redlining have shown themselves on and towards Black people in the city of Trenton was part of that discussion. But also given the history and the work that we've done with the lease body, particularly around how housing impacts education in the state of New Jersey and segregation and things of that issue. So I think there were multiple issues at stake there of why I was asked to be there, but I was certainly happy to be a part. I also think one of the biggest issues is that as the advocacy continues, I think part of it was also kind of furthering and deepening the relationships, because frankly, I don't know. Well, I do know that most of us in our communities don't even know when we're being discriminated against because of the kind of insidious undercover nature of which that's done nowadays. And not only that, I mean, because it's always been insidious and undercover. But truth be told, most of us have been living under the atrocity of this really nasty systemic racism that most of our folks just think that that's what the reality of life is, and that's all that it ever is and all that it's ever going to be. And so I think kind of bringing one here in perspective from advocates, but I also think a big piece of it was trying to make further deep connection with advocates in order to get information out to communities and people on the ground to do more outreach so that more of these kinds of cases and situations can be brought to light in order to deepen the prosecutions and the Justice Department's commitment to go after bad actors.
And so so you said a lot of things in terms of in your speech there that talked about what it means in terms of, and when you and Ryan Hager were talking about supermarkets, you were talking about hospitals. I believe you were talking about the effects of which the effects of what it meant for how our communities have formed. Can you talk to us some about what you said during that symposium, and then get into like Zaid's question about why is the Justice Department even there, and what do you think about what they're doing, right? Because the Justice Department has made some advances toward redlining, which is why Kristen Clark was there giving that keynote speech. What is your take on that history of redlining, what the Justice Department has done, and your response to it?
Yeah, and I think what was particularly strong about this piece is that it was both, you know, the history of redlining and what it has done to our communities, but also the current, present act of redlining that banking institutions currently do, just in particularly different ways. And so one of the pieces that I lifted up specifically in Trenton, which is the state's capital, and you know, we have
we got redlining in the state capital of New Jersey?
Yeah, absolutely. And you and I know if anybody knows, it's you. So I hear every bit of sarcasm in that statement. You know, it's deep, right? That you got all these folks who drive in and out of Trenton between 9 and 4 every single day, and these folks, and they're all over on State Street and all of that, and most of them live in Princeton or in other parts of the state, and come in and out of the halls, and they never even come up or down a block or so where the real Trenton is. I tell folks all the time where the church is situated and where Salvation and Social Justice offices are situated, is in the heart of the city, where it's massive poverty, where about 30 to 40% of the housing stock is just boarded up and abandoned, where people are walking around, really dealing with a lot of despair and hopelessness, where the state, frankly, has even contributed to the blight, because the biggest occupier of the city is the state of New Jersey, and they do not return in dollars the amount of dollars that would be coming to the city through taxation on the prime real estate that they have. There's a major shortfall there.
Pastor Boyer, you have an infrastructure down there. You get off of 29. There's a major hotel, or used to be I believe it used to be a Marriott. The hotel sits there.
Closed now.
I'm sorry, Zaid?
It's closed now. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. But the infrastructure is there. Go in there. We partner with developers all up and down, 95, all these highways. But in our state capital, a rock's throw away from the state house, there's that area right there. And then you go past the state house. I know rest in power, Senator Rice, he used to bring us down there for the black elected officials to the church down past the state house. I forgot the pastor's name down there.
Yeah, probably Shiloh over there. Probably
But
Shiloh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that whole area is just sitting on I know that body of water, and it's amazing because as you coming in through a train, you think you get ready coming to most beautiful, powerful place. As the world makes trend, whatever, I can't remember. You have this sign, but I think the last thing that was really probably developed down there was over by the baseball. Last thing I can remember was probably the baseball area, but it's not. I mean, it's there. The infrastructure's there, and I remember before that hotel, I came to a big conference and uh, stayed overnight and put my foot down. And the hotel and the water had flooded, and the bedroom had flooded. But right there, they had little nice restaurant. You could walk, because they have like those alleyway, streetways. You could walk up and go to a nice restaurants that have been there for years. But I don't understand. We go out and give speeches all the way where you can just walk out the state house and just give a speech there to say we bringing it back. The governor who takes on that project will be one that will be well remembered, because Trenton, really start noticing it going down when I was older. But what will you say was the last time that area was really developed, beautiful, and thriving?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't even say, because it was far, far before my time. And I mean,
Wow.
and
A long time.
it's been a very long time. I can tell you that as far as the Black community is concerned, there was a thriving Black community there. The whole emergence of the church that I'm at Greater
I'm gonna
Zion
I'm gonna get the monster cheesecake.
Okay,
Good to
Jonathan, we
go.
don't all need to know that. Jonathan, let's just show
Oops, sorry.
You
Broadcasting from a restaurant. And,
Yeah, you
Make sure you
share
sit
that.
everybody.
at home. This is the second time I made that mistake. Boy, I was just had it
And
on
his
in
mama
the
will smack him
background.
upside his head. I'm gonna tell his mama.
My bad.
I want to get the monster cheese.
All right. All right, cool. All right. Fair
Get the
enough.
grilled onions.
Now I'm curious.
Yep. So I'm glad I didn't say some other things too either. So I mean, it's all good. It's all good.
Oh my
All right.
gosh.
So wow.
And, but going back, and you have Thomas Edison, and I know they've
Mhm.
done some work with the like you said, with the black mayors. I mean, it's
Yeah, no,
nobody. it-
yeah,
I
it's
when I tell you, Pastor, I was at the meeting, and some of the developers that were working in Orange, I got on the phone with developers. Listen, you need to go. It's here. You don't have to do much. You need um, a hotel partner and a rehab. He is real simple. All that and nobody. If you bring people down there, there's nowhere to stay
Well,
within walking distance of the state house. Probably within a 10-minute ride.
yeah, no,
Segregation is such, and this is one of the reasons I wanted, we wanted to have you on, Charles, because we need to talk about the question of segregation. You would think, I know if I were the governor of the state of New Jersey and my capital city looked like that, I'd be embarrassed.
hmm
So much
Oh,
so,
yeah.
and I would do whatever is necessary to generate an infusion as many diverse resources as necessary, just to bring everybody's living standard up, because your state capital is supposed to look like something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's supposed to represent the
Yeah.
best of what your state
We
has to offer.
we gonna have to change the state capital to Newark, because when you come downtown
Yeah.
Newark, is the big gold globe
But
welcomes
the
you
point
in.
is, segregation is so normalized
Mm.
in our cities like that, right? And
That-
folks are quite comfortable with just that
Yeah.
small pocket
Yeah.
of being all right around the state house buildings, and the rest being black, because they're going back to Princeton and
Exactly,
Donaldson.
because because they're in a little bubble there and they never see it. They never have to deal with it. So they just turn a blind eye to it. I will say, just the kind of inside baseball, having spent a decent amount of time there now, and understanding all of the mechanics. Voting and not being involved really can do a lot of damage on a city. So there was a massively dysfunctional city council for a long time. The leadership on the county level, which is really the main driver and engine to bring resources into a city, was not aggressively pouring into Trenton in the same way that it was pouring to the white suburbs which surround Trenton. And as I quickly came to find out, even if there was willingness from the state to pour the resources in, and I'm certainly not saying that it has been, but had it been, and I would even argue that the excuse that has been used for why it wasn't was the ineptness or the inability of the county and the city to actually execute. So apart from taking the city over, there would be a lot of barriers to actually getting a lot of those pieces done. Now, with all that being said, there's a big difference now. There's been a massive move to shake up the city council. The city council is almost entirely brand new, and there's been a massive shakeup in the county leadership, and so there's a new day coming. I believe what's going to be critically important, and one of the things I am looking to actively work on. There has to be a strong, united Black agenda for Trenton in order to those powers that be accountable to do the very things that were said, because the last thing we want to happen in Trenton is what has happened in some of our other cities, particularly, Jersey City, where it becomes so gentrified and, all the Black folks are basically pushed out. And that's something, we've had a massive, long time historic Black community that we need to make sure that the folks that are there are the ones getting the opportunities and the ones being moved into better situations. So that's one of the pieces where a lot of my attention has been.
And I was
And
surprised.
that's actually, I just want to just add to this point, right? Like, because when a lot of people talk about building up different parts of the city and getting investment in. The question I just want you to elaborate on is, how do you make sure that what you said happened in Jersey City, what you have, or was happening in many other places, right? How do you make sure that doesn't happen? Because when we call for investment, that investment will come, right?
Yeah.
But it will come in ways that we don't like. What is there that, like, you've been dealing with this issue a long time? Specifically, how can this be prevented?
Yeah, I really think
Can I just say one thing, Prof? You make sure that the people sitting on the government don't want that to happen. You know, because if your city government is not doesn't have listen, Mayor Baraka came on there. I can remember one of the first things he did. Any new development, and people fought it hard. I think he did this by executive order. 25% of it has to be affordable. He did that, and I think that was executive order. And then I think the governor took that and and he did it. It was done as state led. They took that and did it for the state as well. But but that came from the leadership. But I have seen other cities where the leadership may be like, well, it's time for a new influx. It's time for this. And if listen, you work for the people that are here now. Worry about the people who's been here and then develop that and then build from that.
So
So
what can specifically be done, Reverend? Like the specific things to prevent the things that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think it's a multi-pronged strategy. I mean, here's I in no way pretend to have all the answers, but here's some things that we are actively looking to do. In the part of the city that we occupy, I think we have amassed enough influence to where as developers are having the chit chat, they are kind of being forced to some degree to have to talk to us. In which case, we're really trying to use the advocacy leverage to do things like making sure XYZ amount of units are prioritized for affordable housing, but also as certain units are being knocked down, trying to oversee and make sure that the folks that are in the existing homes are coming into those units. Really, so that's one. One is kind of an advocacy piece with these power structures that are coming in. Two is to try and get as much work to Black developers that are from the city as well. There are multiple Black developers already in the city, and they kind of have the right mentality for the work. And they're not the major developers, but even if we think about micro development and picking up as many pieces as possible, we have a CDC, a nonprofit, which is even getting into development to some degree, and we're trying to pick up the blighted housing that's all around the church. We're in discussions and negotiation, all the boarded up housing, bringing those houses back online, and we're putting folks that are returning home from incarceration. We're in those units. We're looking to put children aging out of foster care in those units, trying to wrap around services with them, trying to link them to work. We have some partnerships with some Black entrepreneurs.
I want to put a pin in what you're saying, because that is one of the hardest and most often neglected pieces in the development of a fully holistic and sound community-based violence intervention ecosystem, a housing foundation. That's hugely important. I'm glad to hear
exactly. Yes. So that's one of the main pieces that we're working on right now. Literally, we're bringing on someone full time in the next week and a half who has extensive expertise in housing, a sister from the city, who's that's all she's going to do is be working on housing, both for folks coming home and also the folks that the street team is working on. So that's a major part of the infrastructure that we're trying to build. And we're not looking to merely own these units and rent them. Our goal is to get the folks who are going to be occupying them as ready as possible and then sell the homes to them. That's our goal. We have to work all that out. We know we're not going to figure it all out. We know we're going to make mistakes, but we do know when we're looking to do the right thing by our folks, and when folks are looking to do the right thing by our folks, that ultimately things will come together. So that is the goal. That's the plan. That's what we're looking to work out. And so as much as we can get ownership of the areas around us, as much as the Black folks that have some influence, Black folks who, as long as Black folks and the existing Black institutions can get ownership of what's there, because right now, most of the property around us is not owned by Black people. It's not even owned, and most of the folks in the city are renters. So it's only about 35% of Black folks own their homes in the city. 75% of white folks own their homes in the city. And the part of Trenton where we are, it's about a 40% poverty rate in that section of the city. And so there's a tremendous amount of work to be done. And the part of the city that we're in has been designated a choice neighborhood by the federal government. And so even the plans for that area, and there's a people plan, an economic plan, a development plan, which looks to preserve the kind of existing, historical pieces, of which the church is the oldest Black institution in the city. And then, and we sit right in the center of all of that. And then part of the planning of all of that is supposed to be how to bring the existing population into those pieces. So, I mean, it's a lot of
Pastor
work.
Boyer, so when you say choice program, so that means that maybe like a live where you work type of program.
Mhm.
So if a person buys, they'll get the mortgage rates a little bit more, what's the word I want to say, that are attractive, because that they're living right there in the areas, and that's your teachers, your police, and whomever else you choose to put on that list. So is that going to come out of that choice program?
I mean, potentially, but the various work pieces have to be there. Right now, the biggest employer in the city is the state, and that's not even, and most of the folks that the state employ are not even from Trenton per se. And then the second, I think, is Capitol Health. And so, and most of those jobs that our folks are doing are pretty menial, right? And so there has to be an influx. And so I think, again, that's a mix of not only work, but entrepreneurship. I think the more that we get into owning, the better off we're going to be. We really need a larger equity stake in things. And especially since a lot of our folks returning home, if we can ever figure out the way to support those folks. I mean, as you all know, like we have Tracy Syfax and down our way, who has a pretty
story.
Yes,
Great story.
and he exactly. So he's a major partner in everything that we do. So we're looking at really working alongside him to to give folks as many skills as possible into entrepreneurship, so folks have other avenues and can really do for themselves. So there's multiple pieces to it, but it's really about a chess game. It's really about stacking the deck as much as possible. It's about getting as much ownership as possible, and then the negotiations are different with whoever's coming in.
And what about the program that Buster Soros used to do when he had the nonprofit, and I believe they purchased the property, and then after a certain amount of years, you were able to get it back after you got your back on your feet. So programs like that.
Yeah. Very similar model is what we're looking at. I mean, we're also looking, this piece as well is in the very early stages, but where the church is situated is a decent amount of property. We're also looking at, we're bringing a birthing center online in one of the buildings that we have. You know, there's nowhere for a woman to give birth in the city right now. And so Black maternal health is a major issue. But one of the pieces that we're also looking at is on the current church property is expanding and kind of bringing housing. And if we can get the property from everything where the house, where the church ends all the way down to the corner, we can develop a significant amount of housing there that's all attached to the church. And we're looking to, again, prioritize those same populations, but also prioritize, you know, young sisters who are of that various age that need supports around maternal health. But also we're looking at a village model. And so if we're building housing with our people in mind, we can combat the gentrification piece. And that's really what we're looking to be very intentional about how we do things and how we leverage our power and property in order to prioritize our people.
And
One of the things that we
Timberlake has begun. Now you may know that right legislation on Black maternal health. She has tried to do some things in terms of making sure that some things can be insured. Having a good Lord, the one when you
Doulas.
have your yeah, thank you. You know, have
Mhm.
and having that be covered under insurance. So I know she's doing a lot of work around that. But I don't know. When I drive around that neighborhood, I can see the beauty that was in that area. I just love to drive. When you come out the State House, just to drive down there or coming out of the church, you can see that the I could see that when kids were out there jumping rope, and it was a thriving neighborhood at one time. So I think just getting back. Have y'all done like the door to door just to see for whoever's there? Do they know that what the goals are?
Yeah, I mean, we have not explained all that to every door yet,
Hmm.
but we have had multiple discussions in the community. The community as a whole is very, very well aware of, of a lot of what we're trying to do. So literally almost every day we're out and about. The church is always open to there's literally almost every week, at least 1 to 2 community forums with 150 people from the neighborhood, you know, Trenton at large in the church talking about issues. We're always talking about what we're looking to do between Salvation and Social Justice and the GMZ, you know, Greater Mount Zion Community Development Corp. So folks are very well aware, and as we get the plans more and more solidified, um, we'll be having even more conversations.
we started the conversation based on what the Justice Department, like the forum, the symposium that you're at with Feature the Justice Department and what they were doing. One of the conversations that was being had was that these things need to be worked at on both the federal, the state, and the local level in terms of money. Do you see some of the things the justice, like the settlements they had? Do you see that any of the accomplishments that they have with redlining helping to either fund, help, influence in any way the stuff that you're talking about in terms of actually getting people into home ownership?
Mhm. Yeah, I see. So, you know, they've talked about several settlements between the federal and the state, more so on the federal level, that have been done around the country, which have gone into accounts which do very much that. I do, you know, I know one of the settlements that took place was here in New Jersey, and mostly in northern New Jersey with Lakewood Bank. I do see it as potential. I see it as a tool to do the very kind of things. I think it's going to be critically important that that the work is done, you know, because redlining is taking place in a lot of various different ways. And to answer the question, you know, in the negative way, I don't currently see any dollars available that link to these things right now, specifically to Trenton. You know, but again, I do think them being around, these conversations happening, it feels like there's more and more energy, and they are having a good hard look at all of this. And I think it's really important to note and understand, you know, on the state level, because I've had conversations, for instance, with the, you know, the new folks over at the Civil Rights Division on the state level. You know, that clock is ticking. So we may only see but so much in the next 2 years. And it's taken all this time just to kind of get the Civil Rights Division on the state level to somewhat be alive again, you know, and it's just starting to kind of sort of get to the place where it's functional because it was gutted under Christie. And so, you know, I think we have to be diligent because all that can be unwound again. And the same to some degree is on the federal level. You know, so much depends on how we vote, what's going to happen, because these things take time. So all this progress can be rolled back if we revert to some folks in these administrative, in these executive positions, whether it's on the federal level or on the state level, that we have no leverage with.
And also the environment, the cleanliness of our neighborhood. I know with all development here in Essex County, we were dealing with a rodent problem. I just seen in New York where the mayor has appointed a czar for their rodent problem. Is that something that that you guys have had a problem with down there, and are you making sure that that's addressed while all this development? Because when you move, certain things happen, and I mean it's been really bad in
Yeah.
Essex County.
Yeah, I mean, there's been barely any development in the city up to this point. So at this point, in regards to development, no. Is there a rodent problem? Yes. I mean, my wife was looking out her office window the other day, and she said there was this large thing, and I said, "Baby, that's a rat." You know,
Wow.
and it was like this big.
Yes.
So
Wow.
like we're talking about things look like little dogs or something, you know.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
I say
and,
because
and
y'all do
especially
have the
here first.
relationship. Y'all do have the relationship with Mayor Adams, so we don't have to reinvent everything. Maybe that's something we can look at and see how we can, it's in the Tri-City area. We can look at that because it's like they walk down the street with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I, I, I was thinking about like what you were saying in terms of redevelopment, and what everyone is really talking about, and that whole and the different things that you want to put in place with the community, whether it be what Donna was talking about in terms of getting the politicians on the same page, whether it's getting like trying to get money from different places. Um, is there a way? Is there a hesitancy to push forward until those things are in place? Like, as in, the minute that Trenton becomes hot and that people want to invest, do other voices just get pushed aside? Right? Should it be something that there's a call to create a plan among the people who are within Trenton before there is a call for investment in Trenton?
Yeah, absolutely. And that, I alluded to it earlier. One thing in a place that I'm really going to be directing a lot of energy over the course of the next 6 months is really creating a united Black agenda for Trenton. Working with the Trenton NAACP, which just elected new leadership as of today. The Capital City Area Black Caucus, which meets at our church. We have a decent amount of Black elected officials, which I think should chime in, but obviously they're also part of part of the equation of accountability. But they all have a good amount of institutional knowledge and weigh in. and multiple other folks that we need to be bringing to the table in order to really come up with this plan and come up with what the demands are. So as the county leadership shifts, we are all on one page or have similar talking points when it comes down to what it is that we're looking for in these neighborhoods. What are the demands? How are we prioritizing the people? Various things, education, et cetera, et cetera. Also, we have a mayor that is in a second term now, which our demands need to be made clear to. And also as whatever incoming governor comes into place, because all of these pieces are going to be critical. So to the point, if we're all on the same or at least similar pages around Black priorities and Black ownership in the city, and have that written down, this is what it is. So we would have to deal with the county leadership, deal with the city leadership, and deal with the state leadership. Because yes, I mean, I've talked to about 3 different developers who have put in bids for the areas of the city in which we occupy. And each of them I've had to kind of lean on when it comes down to who the target population is for the units that they're trying to bring in. And so, our goal is to do as much pressurizing of these situations as we can to prioritize the people, knowing that we may not win everything, but certainly we won't win anything if we don't do anything.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
Pastor Boyer also, what did I have? I was just writing notes that I was at a meeting with the Port Authority, and there was a statement made that New York, when it comes to the Port Authority, New York asks for everything. New Jersey doesn't. And we, in the statement in the room, to be reminded that, that Port Authority, Newark is many of our cities' home airport, and Philly is close to Trenton, and that those are some. We should reach out to them more because in this movie, some of the things, but especially when it came to community, they were before they were going to before they upgraded LaGuardia, the community stopped them and said, "Wait, you didn't ask us." And I think that's one of the things that New York and I think Atlanta, they have community groups where the legislators have to bring them before the community groups to make sure that they have that community input. And I've seen it at work in Atlanta, and seen it at work in New York, and especially New York developers. They are primed to do for the community because New Yorkers have those community groups, and I think often we underestimate if we just put out on the table what we'll get back in terms of answers. So I just encourage us to ask more.
Mhm. Yeah, no, you're 1,000% right. I think we often, I think along with that, and I mean, I'm definitely hearing what you're saying, and part of this equation, and even what I'm thinking about is community benefit agreements, right? Just
Right.
making that's basically what's going down when we're talking to these developers and saying, what's going to be and then obviously negotiating that in a real structured way and having it as a legally binding situation. That's also the conversation, frankly, just on a whole nother topic, but that needs to be had, that we all in our various communities need to be having with these cannabis entities that are coming into the city,
Right.
Mm,
right?
That's right.
It's the
absolutely.
same
And money's
type
supposed
of
to be coming back into our community. That's right.
That's right.
Exactly. So it's the same kind of negotiations that we need to be organizing and having to make sure that the community is benefiting.
And we did it with the banks, the Community Reinvestment Act. So yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well,
So
well,
that's it. Yeah.
well. I know we're reaching the end of the show, and we always want to ask that final question. And so first, thank you so much for coming on. And we appreciate you coming on and informing the community. And as you always do, right? You've been on our show before, and every time you come on, we learn something. So I appreciate that. But also, the last question we always ask is, who's your favorite hip hop artist, individual or group, or just who you rocking with now?
Well, I mean, every time I'm on here, I mean, there's just endless folks that are my favorite. But I was definitely a Native Tongues guy. You know what I'm saying? A Tribe Called Quest and all of them. De La Soul, particularly, with the recent death of True Goy. So I think about De La Soul. But literally in the past 2 days, I've had Eve with the joint that Dr. Dre produced stuck in my head. Well, that with the Blow Your Mind has been stuck in my head the past couple of days. I don't know why. So I don't know why I'm just moving with that. But yeah, that's just what's been stuck with me for the past 2 days.
Reverend Boyer, what's
Mhm.
what's the hip hop group from Trenton? Oh gosh.
Poor Righteous Teachers.
Yes. How when you come back? We
You're
have to
not
try to
from
connect.
Plainfield. We'll get wait a minute.
Yes. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm from Plainfield.
Right.
Right. But I'm just saying down in Trenton, down Poor Righteous
Teachers was out of Trenton, but P Funk
Right.
was out. George Clinton was out of Plainfield.
That's right.
Yeah, but one of the brothers from Poor Righteous Teachers, he's from a community standpoint. I remember down to Lincoln Park Fest, he was just doing freestyle, and at the end, his last line was, "Now go home and hug a thug." I was like, okay,
That's funny.
he was, yeah, I would love to see, next time we come on, just because
You
where
want to go hug a
community
thug?
meets.
Right.
Go and to see them because I know one of them does a lot of community work.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Well, I was gonna say,
Huh?
I was gonna say, thank you so much for being on.
You.
We really definitely appreciate you. Got to get you back on to talk about
More
more
often.
what's
Yes.
going on and what you're doing.
I'm glad you're in Trenton.
Yep. And so thank all of our guests. Thank them.
Yeah. I'm super happy too. We'll talk more about that, but I'm super grateful to be there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right.
So thank the mayor on. Thank you for coming on. We had a great conversation about political prisoners, and thank you for coming on with telling us what's going on in Trenton and how you spoke at that program. So appreciate you much.
Thank you.
All right. God bless you. Yep. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care.